A warmer for the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets. We're going to be chatting with him about what he's all seen thus far this season, some of the betting angles that he takes a look at this time of year, as well as we are now getting into the nitty-gritty part of things. We're going to talk about teams that find themselves in must-wins that are on the bubble. That means that, well, they must just not be that good, and we're going to be diving into a lot of games that we've got for Wednesday and some of the surprise teams that he's been seeing as well in the final segment. Going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @G_81. Keep in mind, letter CM, the me does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And while I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, we had ourselves a fun day of college basketball on Tuesday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Plenty of star-studded teams in action on Tuesday, and for Miami of Ohio, they do not get the cover, and Miami of Ohio has legitimately been one of your best over teams in all of college basketball. They play a rare under here against Buffalo. They get the job done, and they remain undefeated. This by a count of 73-71, and in case we were wondering, for Miami of Ohio, also one of your better against the spread teams in all of college basketball. No covers against Buffalo this far this season, but now 14-6 against the spread this far this season, and 14 overs to 6 unders, so very equal there. But for Buffalo, they did a nice job holding in there with Antonio Breezy, be able to give you 22 points, threw in there a pair of steals, and for Buffalo, just 9-28 from 3. But Miami of Ohio, they went cold from 3, 6-22 from the outside. They realized that, and they pile drive the ball down, though. They went 26 out of 36 on their 2-point shots. Now they only go 3 of 6 at the free throw line, and they actually lose the rebound battle 36-28, but they find a way to be able to win the turnover battle 15-13, and for Miami of Ohio, Luka Seljak, hopefully I got that correct, he was able to give the team 19 points. For St. John's, they get a nice win and cover against DePaul, this by a count of 68-56, as DePaul has actually been one of your best against the spread teams in all of college basketball this year. That actually drops them to now 15-7-1 against the spread. This was a closing number in a lot of places, more in that neighborhood of about 10.5 was what I was seeing. Mostly I was seeing some 9.5s out there as well, but for St. John's, they really did a nice job ugling up this game, and for DePaul, they just had nothing to be able to drop in this game. They go 5-20 from 3. They shoot 35% from 4. DePaul actually wins the rebound battle 37-36, but lost that turnover battle 15-7, and for St. John's, Zuby Ejiofor, 16 points, 9 rebounds. He was able to take hold of this game. For Virginia, talk about ugly games. They had one against Pittsburgh as they get the job done 67-47, the final in this one, and for Pittsburgh, they're now 10-13 against the spread, so that's not great for them as Pittsburgh, they go 6 of 19 from 3, and on their 2-point shots, they go 11 out of 27, so just not able to get a lot there. And for Pittsburgh, they lose the turnover battle 17-10. When you've got as many made field goals as you've got turnovers, that's not great. And for Virginia, Sam Lewis was able to lead the way, 15 points, not a great expose of offense from them, 11 of 31 from 3, but defense was certainly able to hold up. For St. Louis, they have been one of your best stories in all of college basketball this season. Now, this depended upon your closing number on this one, as for St. Louis, they win by 9. They're now 13-7-2 against the spread. And a lot of places, they were closing this one more in that neighborhood of about 9.5. So it depended upon your number, whether you got a push, whether you got lost, or something else. But 91-82, they take down Davidson. As for St. Louis, Robbie Avila, he was able to give the team 17 points. But the top scorer off the bench was Brady Dunlap, 22 points, 6 of 6 from 3. For a St. Louis team that goes 12-27 from 3. For Davidson, they do lose a rebound battle 41-30. Now Davidson won the turnover battle 10-7, and they had on their side Josh Scovins, who was able to give the team 17 points, 10 rebounds, but another nice win for St. Louis, who was down 5 points at the half. They rallied the second half. They win that second half 50-36, and you had a very overwhelming second half in Tennessee versus Ole Miss, and it's an Ole Miss team that is really not covering a lot of numbers thus far this season. For Ole Miss, they're down to 8-14 against the spread, as Tennessee absolutely blows them out in the second half, 84-66 the final. This was 26-25 at the half. Tennessee Tennessee outscores Ole Miss 58-41 in the second half. This does not look like a vintage Chris Beard team. As for Tennessee, 9 of 24 from 3. Jacoby Gillespie, 20 points on 5 of 10 3-point shooting, but Nate Amond, who's been a little bit hot and cold this year, 28 points, 6 rebounds. He stepped up in a big way, and for Tennessee, they absolutely roll on the glass. 40-23. They win that rebound battle. UConn, they've actually been one of your lesser college basketball teams in terms of against the spread record this year at 9-14 against the spread, but now back-to-back covers for them, and they dump truck Xavier 92-60. The final is for UConn, 10-27 from 3-point range. Xavier, they actually play even up on the turnover battle, 13-13, but Xavier lost the rebound battle, 41-24. And for UConn, just a holds greater than some of his parts approach, with Silas Emery being able to be your top scorer, 17 points, 8 assists, did have 4 turnovers, but he was able to do a nice job on that front end. For Xavier, was all right with 14 points, but nobody else had more than 10 points in this game, so that was not all right. For Duke, they do not get the cover against Boston College, but they get a nice win, 67-49 the final. Duke was up 15 points at the half, and then just 47 points in the second half. It was a sloppy slog. As for Boston College, 5 of 20 from 3-point range, and hey, Boston College as an underdog has not been the world's worst team against the spread. They're 10-12, but in the role of an underdog, they actually have not been too bad. But that said, for Duke, Cameron Bouger still supplying 19 points, 12 boards, pair of assists, 5 steals, so he was still able to do a relatively solid job there. And free throw shooting was not good in this game. Duke 14-20 at the free throw line, 4 of 9 for Boston College, but Duke and North Carolina both go into their big matchup on Saturday, having had non-covers, so that's going to be intriguing to take a look at. Now, I do have to have this up by midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock game Eastern, and right now, Wyoming, who's been one of your lesser against the spread teams in all of college basketball thus far this season, 8-13 against the spread. They're currently down double figures at the half against San Diego State. That was a line of about 12-12.5, so we shall see what happens there. Wyoming has really been slowed down here in conference play, so that's been interesting to take a look at, to say the least. And USC seems to be getting things online, 81-75. They get the win, they get the cover against Indiana. As for Indiana, just 10-35 from 3-point range. USC wins a rebound battle, 40-25. They do lose the turnover battle, 15-10, but they've had Cam Woods really be able to step up, played all 40 minutes, 18 points, like the only of the midseason acquisitions for these teams that has actually panned out. He's been able to do quite a bit for USC, so a little bit of credit where it is due there. The MAC has had some intriguing teams with regards to cover rate, obviously Miami of Ohio being your top one, but you've had other teams be able to provide you a little bit of value, like Eastern Michigan, who's now 16-6 against the spread this season. They lose to Akron, but they hold in. They're 66-64 the final. One of the few teams to slow down Akron all season long. As Eastern Michigan, they go 8 of 20 from 3-point range. You had Gregory Lawson throwing there 17 points. He's seen some minutes with Carlos Hart, who was part of that gambling probe, no longer being out there. And for Eastern Michigan, they do win their rebound battle, 41-33. Lost this game because they went 10 of 16 at the free throw line and lost a turnover battle, 16-13, but did a nice job holding in there. And you got a Ball State team that's been a pretty nice fade this far this season. How about for them? 7-12-1 against the spread, and they just get blowtorch against Bowling Green. Bowling Green, they roll 77-52 the final. You had Josiah Shackelford supply 21.6 rebounds, and Bowling Green has been one of the better turnover rate teams in the country, and actually lose the turnover battle 14-10, but they won the rebound battle 38-21. And Ball State, they go a nice hearty 4 of 21 from 3-point range, so not tremendous for them. And should throw in there that Buffalo now 14-7 against the spread. Western Michigan is also 12-8 against the spread, and Ohio's been just 9-13 against the spread, but it does appear as though Ohio is starting to turn a corner a little bit. They were able to get a nice win and cover over Western Michigan, 91-71 the final. Jackson Paveleski, 17 points for an Ohio team that they shoot 13 of 32 from 3. They've been a bottom 30 team in terms of 3-point shooting percentage all season long, so starting to come together for them a little bit. And we also saw some Missouri Valley Conference action as well as Illinois State. They fall at home as a favorite to Southern Illinois, 54-50 the final, and Illinois State has all of a sudden become a really good under team for you thus far this season. As for Illinois State, with this under now 14 unders to just 8 overs thus far this season, and Southern Illinois, they do not shoot it well from 3 at all. They are now up to 6 overs to 16 unders. Eastern Michigan, by the way, should throw this in there with their under. They're now up to 6 overs to 16 unders as well, but for Southern Illinois, they win this game going 1 of 11 from 3-point range, but they shot 11 of 15 at the free throw line. Illinois State 6 of 10 at the charity stripe. For Southern Illinois, 41-35, they win the rebound battle. They actually do lose the turnover battle, 15-12, but Kelron House, 22 big points. That was enough to be able to get the job done. For Fordham, they've been a relatively solid cover team for you, and they have been amazing to the under. 4 overs to 16 unders. That is the highest under rate in all of college basketball, and they did a nice job in terms of slowing down VCU, as VCU gets a win, but no cover, 63-59. The final for VCU. They do go 6 of 16 from 3-point. Fordham just 4 of 18 from the outside, but they hold in there with DeJour Reeves supplying 21 points. And for VCU, nobody to blame but themselves for the non-cover. 17 of 28 at the free throw line. They lost the turnover battle by a count of 15-9 as well. Also out there in the Atlantic 10, it's been a rough year for both Loyola Chicago and LaSalle, but Loyola Chicago a triumph 71-61 with Joseph a la Joseph being able to give the team 16 points, and Loyola Chicago actually got down in this game 16-4 very early on, but for this LaSalle team, they lose the rebound battle 36-29 as Miles Rubin down low was able to supply 11 rebounds, only 2 points, but that was good enough to be able to get the cover. And for this LaSalle team, they've been a pretty good under team thus far this season, as right now for LaSalle, they do find themselves with 9 overs at 13 unders, and for Loyola Chicago, it's just been all over the place for them. They actually have been hitting more overs than unders thus far this season, and you take a look against the spread, and Loyola Chicago still not yielding a lot of fruit for you. It's 7-17 against the spread, but yay verily to that cover, and Fordham getting back to them now 11-8-1 against the spread, and LaSalle, they're now 9-13 against the spread, so has been a little bit of a less than tremendous season for them. If you're looking out there in the Ohio Valley Conference, you did see SIU Edwardsville as a little bit of an underdog. They're now 11-10 against the spread, but they've been able to do a solid job as a under team. They did have an over game in this game. They're now 12 unders to 9 overs thus far this season. They do find a way to be able to persevere, get the job done against Lindenwood in a game that did have quite a bit of fouling, 78-72 final there. So I have to give them a little bit of credit where it is due, as we did have a lot of Missouri Valley Conference action, as well as Murray State has been a team that's been able to do a nice job against the spread. They're now 13-11 against the spread. Had a little bit of a tough time on Tuesday, as Murray State, they do get the win, but no cover against Illinois Chicago. UIC 81-74 the final, and UIC all of a sudden has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of covering numbers themselves. If you take a look at this UIC team overall for the season, with this cover, they were able to go to now 11-10-1 against the spread. But if you look specifically in terms of their conference games, because they had a little bit of a less than tremendous non-conference portion, they're now up to 9-4 against the spread within the conference, as Valparaiso is actually 9-3 against the spread within the conference as well. They lose, but they do get the cover against Bradley, that by a count of 72-65, as Valparaiso's not been able to get a whole heck of a lot going on offense, but they did a nice job holding in on that game. And then for St. Bonaventure, they have just not been able to cover numbers this year. They do cover this game on Tuesday against Seton, 72-70 the final. And St. Bonaventure has, by the way, been one of your best over teams in all of college basketball. For the Bonnies, very uncharacteristic to see them towards the top of this list, 16 overs to 6 unders, but this was held down a little bit more, as St. Bonaventure has actually given up fewer points per possession away from home rather than at home, and they were held in this game by Frank Mitchell doing a nice job down low, supplied the team with 16 points, 12 rebounds, and for the Bonnies, they go 4 of 19 from 3. Dayton, they go 6 of 19 from 3, and Dayton, they win this game thanks to going 28 out of 33 at the free throw line. Jordan Durcock off the bench, 12 of 15 at the free throw line to be able to help the team out, so that was a relatively fun one. And in terms of against the spread for St. Bonaventure with cover, now just 8-14 against the spread. Meanwhile, for Dayton, with their non-cover, 9-14 against the spread. So you've had quite a few teams out there in the Atlantic 10 not be able to cover numbers. And another game of fascination was Belmont versus Drake. If you're going back to the Ohio Valley Conference, 103-90. Belmont is able to get the job done, and it's been a Belmont team that's been very interesting in terms of their totals. They're now up to 12 overs to 10 unders thus far this season. And Drake, they've actually been a nice under team, 13 unders to just 9 overs. But for this Drake team, they've also been a team that's been a little bit rough against the spread thus far this season. A little bit of a coaching change from past years. And for Drake, they are now 9-13 against the spread. Belmont, they're 12-10-1 against the spread. And Valparaiso, I mentioned their conference against the spread record, now 14-7-1 against the spread, with Bradley with that non-cover going down to 8-15 against the spread thus far this season. Then you had the almighty slog between Little Rock and UT Martin. UT Martin a win but no cover, 55-52 the final in this one. And Little Rock has been another one of those teams that just has not been able to cover numbers for you thus far this season. But hey, you're able to get a nice cover here, as Little Rock now against the spread with this cover, 9-12 against the spread. And UT Martin has been a team that has been able to do a pretty solid job against the spread at 11-8 against the spread, but just nothing doing on offense for either of these teams. UT Martin 10 of 36 from 3, 4 of 15 for Little Rock, and Little Rock, they go 2 of 3 at the free throw line, and UT Martin went 5 of 10 at the charity stripe. But both teams had 17 turnovers apiece, so a nice grody game there. And there's been a lot of Ohio Valley teams that have been able to cash you a lot of unders. As a matter of fact, you take a look at the entirety of the Ohio Valley Conference, and right now you've got Southern Indiana and UT Martin both with 14 unders to 6 overs. Little Rock has actually played more overs than unders, but I mean, it's been a conference that has been seeing a lot of slogs, to say say the least. And if you're taking a look at trend-wise, what we're getting right now, we have been seeing quite a few slogs this far this season. And if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, the under rate is 51.3%, 173 unders to 164 overs, with underdogs hitting at about 50.7% over the last 7 days, 171 and 166. And if you look overall for the season, it has been a dog-a-palooza season, with the underdogs hitting at 51.2%, 1,959 and 1,869 against the spread. Meanwhile, the over rate in college basketball is about 49.4%, 1,890 overs to 1,939 unders. So that's where we're seeing college basketball right now, and that's where we're getting trend-wise. Coming up next, how about if we chatted up with our good friend Rob Donaldson of the Rob's Best Bets show right here on Cuz Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cuz Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Rob Donaldson aboard. He does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he's doing great work over there at Underdog Fantasy, as I know that he's getting set for what should be a very exciting Super Bowl, and he's dialed in on getting set for what is going to be a great baseball season as well. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at RobDFB altogether. And Rob, it is always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. And it's crazy that we found ourselves here in the start of February with only a month ago to actually get to March and have all of these games really come down the stretch and mean so much to every single program. You know, whether talking about a high major or mid major, it doesn't matter. Everybody's kind of chasing that same goal. And right now, I think we're getting kind of the peak, elevated college basketball, and it's only going to get better as we go week by week here.
Oh, it is going to be an amazing next few weeks. And just how do you take a look at this time of year? What are some of the betting angles that you look at perhaps now that maybe might not have been so much on your radar towards the beginning part of the season / even just like a month or so ago?
Yeah, what I think is actually really starting to come into frame is you're going to start to see a lot of kind of these lower or middle teams, and you're looking at just like the conference standings, really start to elevate their play. Every single year, it just kind of feels like a team is flat out done. They've already kind of, done everything they can to really show themselves, and they haven't shown much. And then teams just come out of nowhere. Well, we can kind of look down conference by conference right now, and we can highlight 3, 4, maybe even 5 teams in some of these larger leagues as teams that might really come on later on in the season. And those are the teams that right now, as we kind of traverse through February, those are a lot of teams that you want to end up back in, not the teams necessarily that have kind of the highest hierarchy position when it comes to those conference standings at the moment.
Yep, I think that is so good to be taking a look at it. How much do you want to put yourself sort of in that narrative? Because bracketology is going to be becoming very much a thing here over the next few weeks. I know you and I, with regards to our handicap, we don't necessarily look at it as like, oh, they need this game or anything like that, but a lot of the public does. And I think putting yourself honestly against a lot of these teams is a very good thing, because I say this in all sports, whether that be baseball, football, college basketball, hockey. I mean, it doesn't matter the sport. If you're in a must-win situation to get into the playoffs, that, in my opinion, means you must not be very good.
100%. And I think sometimes that can ante up the pressure when you are sitting on the bubble. And there are some teams right now that aren't considered necessarily as, maybe being on the bubble. They kind of feel like as if they almost have a leg up on the bubble and they're firmly in. Well, those teams, it starts to mount when you go on those 2 or 3 game losing skids, especially when you drop maybe a game to like those lower end of the conference types of teams. And you got to be weary of the team that you really liked at the beginning of the season, maybe has shown some really hot flashes, but all of a sudden is playing some really losing basketball down the stretch. We just talked about kind of the reverse of that, of teams finding their way later on in the season, but college basketball is a human element sport. You brought up Major League Baseball. I think there's no sport that perfectly encapsulates the human element of hitting 400 in a given month and then going on an 0 for 30 slump to start a month. It happens all the time, and with these teams, with it only being 5 players on the court at a time, things can change over the course of a season for whatever reason, and that's 100% something to monitor game by game and kind of those 3-game pockets of scopes.
Oh, absolutely. As we do have Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And no doubt about it, we are going to have ourselves some nice games for Wednesday, as we've got ourselves a big card for Wednesday. I believe we've got 62 games in total, but I look at this game, and this feels like one of those teams that is hiding out there in plain sight. That'd be Central Florida. They're on the road against Houston. I thought that they would get a little number next to their name this week. They did not. Right now, we're finding them as 14.5-point underdogs, and I'm not going to sit here and say that Central Florida is winning this game outright or anything like that, but how do you take a look at a Central Florida team that, to me, it just feels like they're really undervalued? I feel like nobody has paid any attention to this program since Taco Fall was there, and Central Florida, in my opinion, is one of those teams that is playing some good basketball that is really off the radar.
And I think when you look at Central Florida, one thing that I really like about them is they have a proven coach in Johnny Dawkins, who, yes, when you look at the scope of how they performed in the Big 12, this is sort of their breakout year within the conference, but you go back to the American League, or the American Conference rather, when you had kind of this 1-bid or 2-bid league dynamic always at play. Maybe UCF wasn't kind of in charge of being that at-large team to filter in, but they were always a team that had a chance to really kind of make some damage happen in conference play or in the conference tournament. And it comes down to, I think, Johnny Dawkins, one, being able to identify a talent, but also being able to be a good enough coach down the stretch to kind of win those close games. I remember when they played, at UCF, when UCF was in the American, playing Zion Williamson and Duke and having Taco Fall be a mainstay problem. I think the talent accumulation that Johnny Dawkins has on this particular team is going to be so much more overwhelming than in years past. And that does, in my opinion, make them a legitimate threat, not only in the Big 12 conference, but I think on a national stage here as well. When you're looking at this game in particular in a vacuum, it's going to be their biggest test, I think. And I think ultimately, when you look at just the spread, where this game is sitting at in terms of the course of the season, it might be a little bit too much for UCF, but I do like them to actually come out and cover this number, in my opinion.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I do feel like this should be a double-figure number, but now that we're getting up to like 14.5 points, just went a little bit too far for me. So we're going to have some fun with that one. As Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, he's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Soups. Certainly that's one that I have my eye on for Wednesday. But another big game, in my opinion, is going to be what we're going to get out of Stanford versus Clemson, because Clemson is right now 8-1 in the ACC. Now, Duke has been running away with the conference because they've only got one loss all season long, and that was outside the conference. But Clemson right now, 3.5-point favorite. They have to go through all this travel. What do you make out of this game for a Stanford team that, I know that things have been less than savory for them, but a win here might be able to put them back on the bubble as well? And I feel like this is a big matchup that's happening late night.
100%. And what's very interesting about this dynamic is it's setting up potentially in terms of this kind of road to Duke. When you're talking about Clemson, they're only one game back in the standings. They haven't gotten that Duke game under their belt yet. And last year, when Duke came to Clemson, South Carolina, well, Duke got upset. They lost to this Clemson team. And so I think from that standpoint, it looks almost like a nice little runway. You get Stanford, you get Cal, you get Virginia Tech. Are those teams, the bottom feeders in the ACC? No, but I feel like all of those games are potentially winnable. And that almost kind of sets up the what we just talked about of looking too far ahead, or that team that maybe kind of hits a skid at a weird time. it wouldn't surprise me if in those 3 games that Clemson goes 1 for 3, especially with 2 of those games being on the West Coast road trip. And because of that, I'm looking at a small number here with Stanford, and I'm liking the small number here with Stanford. I think if you took the Cal game and the Stanford game and just put it in a vacuum, I don't think Clemson is sweeping the board there. So take my shot here with Stanford. If Stanford doesn't hit, I'm probably looking at Cal to perform maybe a cover or an outright upset in the next one there.
And it's going to be really interesting to see what we get out of the Stanford team because they have been so hit or miss at home, it feels like this year. Right. I still go back to that game against Notre Dame where it felt like there were 2 lids on the basket throughout the entirety of the game. And then there's this game as well with the leader in the SEC being a 7.5 to an 8.5 point underdog at Texas A&M with Alabama. Right now they're 7.5 to 8.5 point favorites and total in some places as high as a 180.5. What do you make out of this with an Alabama team that I really like what they did in the non-conference portion to test themselves, but they got absolutely waxed against Florida? And Texas A&M, they're a team that just time and time again has been able to get the job done. Not much was expected because they hired Bucky McMillan late in the process, and he has done wonders with this program.
Not to mention, they just added a bunch of talented mid-major players and basically said, hey, we're going to figure out what sticks. There's a lot of guys right now, when you look at their roster and kind of, I guess, the talent accumulation through the portal that just truly aren't getting minutes. And that's one thing that it can be kind of a give or take in the beginning of trying to find that balance of, okay, we're bringing in Jakari Lane, we're bringing in Holloway, we're bringing in Vincent, Federico. Who deserves playing time? Mbako, Isaacs. I mean, you can literally go down the list of this roster and you have dudes who are 4th year, 5th year, 6 players coming in from different programs, let alone, and bringing in a new head coach to spearhead the program. That can be a spelling of disaster for a lot of different programs. I think with Buckyball and the way that they've really traversed, especially into conference play, they kind of started off shaky, but it's been so darn impressive. And I don't think it's a fraud. I think there's a lot of people that are hesitant that with Texas A&M, heck, last time out against Georgia on Saturday, they were 3.5 to 4.5 point underdogs there as well. This is a more sizable number, and maybe the books do know something in terms of kind of how they're going to project against these faster, high-scoring offenses. But until they actually see that on the court, I'm not willing to lay that suspicious number on the other side. Maybe I don't want to take it with Texas A&M. It might just be a look-and-see game. But I think in terms of the long-term trajectory, Texas A&M is a team that I think is absolutely for real.
Yep, and with Alabama, it's going to be really interesting to watch them moving forward, getting back Charles Bediako, who was drafted in the NBA a few years ago, and I've said it on the podcast a few times. Hopefully, those of you that have heard the joke appreciate this one. It's like when you saw the movie The Benchwarmers, they bring in that guy who has the crayon that says, I'm 12 on there. That's like Charles Bediako getting his college eligibility back. So that's been a lot of fun to watch, to say the least. And certainly, I think that this is going to be an interesting dynamic as well, because for Illinois, they go out there, they get the job done against Nebraska, they rob the bleeping bank, as they were trying to say. That was a fun game. Now they have to bounce back as 15.5 point favorites here against Northwestern. How do you take a look at both Illinois overall? Because I think that they're playing some of the best basketball in all of college basketball right now, and also this game in what could be perhaps a little bit of a letdown spot against an interstate rival.
Yeah, I think Illinois right now, when you're looking at, again, kind of that long-term trajectory, Wagler has come out of absolute nowhere when you're talking about...
I didn't know he was on the roster until like a month and a half ago.
Bingo. And I think even if, Greg, you watch the first month and a half, maybe even 2 months, if you're stretching out just kind of on the nail, he was a factor, but he wasn't the factor. Now he's coming out and he's just like saying, Purdue, I think I'm going to drop 50 tonight on you. It's just every single night since conference play has started, he's not just a factor into why they're playing well. He is the definitive factor. And as we've kind of known Greg for years upon years, maybe it's not necessarily the guards, but it's that primary ball handler, that primary scorer. Teams are going to run through that guy. Illinois has got a great one. And a 15.5 point number It's very intense. You look over the history of this rivalry in the last 5 years, this number does not get covered very often, but I think this Illinois team is just of a different breed. And even after that, those high profile wins that they've been accumulating, I think this number is not one that I want to be taking. Maybe again, don't want to be laying it, but I think I'm closer to laying it rather than being on the side of the dog, even with this number being outlandish based on the history of the results.
It is going to be interesting to take a look at this game. And I mentioned two teams I'm very bullish on that I feel like a lot of people are sleeping upon. Central Florida and Illinois, they're going to be both in action on Wednesday. And who are a few teams for you that you feel like might be going a little bit under the radar, might be a little bit undervalued? They can be playing on Wednesday, they could be playing on Thursday, just anytime. It's dealer's choice on this one, but just a few teams that you're really starting to find value on that you feel like there's a lot of people that maybe are sleeping on them just a little bit.
What I really love about the landscape of this season, Greg, is there are so many conferences that are just open to so many different teams potentially stealing a bid or potentially just getting in down the stretch here and really kind of showing themselves as a top end force. And one of the teams that I think has just been, I guess, one of the ultimate surprises, and it's truly not a surprise when you look at kind of who they brought back, but I'll take you out to the A-Sun, where right now it kind of feels like one of those races of, oh, it's Lipscomb again. You know, they're firmly in the mix. Austin Peay, you know, we've seen them contend in the A-Sun title game over past years as well. And heck, look at that. Both of them are contending tomorrow. But let me take you to the hottest team, I think, at the A-Sun, who is bringing back their star in Cameron Hunter, who had a one-year kind of spurt off in Wisconsin that didn't amount to much. He came back to the program.
And a lost year due to injury.
You're right. And a lost year to injury. And now Central Arkansas, out of nowhere, 7-2 in conference play, 5 straight wins. They probably have the best guard play in the entire conference. And, you know, when it comes down to the A-Sun futures market, when that market does open up, I'm going to have a hand on Central Arkansas, but certainly down the stretch as well, with them having a bad looking win-loss record from an optics standpoint. I think you overlook that. You look at how they performed in conference, especially down the stretch. That's a team that I want to be backing often and all the way throughout the rest of the season. And then, you know, you just highlighted UCF in kind of a high major league. Well, I'm going to highlight another team in a high major league that's getting seemingly no pub, and that's Villanova. Villanova's playing Seton Hall. I really love how this team is trending. I think they're going to be a team that actually makes some noise in the Big East tournament as well. If they can just get over the hump that is UConn, I think they have a chance to actually win that conference tournament outright. And they're playing Seton Hall. I think they make a statement, win by double digits, and cover that 7.5 point line.
It is going to be very interesting because Seton Hall was one of those teams towards the beginning part of the season I was feeling really bullish on as well. It's kind of gone down the toilet bowl for them recently, so that is going to be a fun one to take a look at as well. And are there any games that we haven't hit yet that you might be having a bet on and you're eyeing up for Wednesday? Because we do have ourselves a little bit of everything from the Atlantic Sun to the Big 10 to the Big 12. It's pretty much a delight if you're a college basketball fan. Anything else that's really standing out to you?
I think when you look at the board on Wednesday, what's really nice about it is there's a mix of mid-major basketball, high profile games on the high major level. And one of the ones that I think kind of fits in the middle of a high level mid-major conference is a matchup in the American between FAU and Tulsa. Obviously, Tulsa's had kind of this, remarkable season. They've been playing really well, and FAU as of late has kind of hit the skids. But I feel like if there's any time to get off the mat, produce a performance that actually ends up, sending yourself propelled into kind of that mix again, right here for FAU at home in Boca Raton. Do they get it done under Jacobs, or is Jacobs maybe a coach that finds himself almost on the way out after a short span? I think that's possible if they lose this game. I don't think they lose this game, but you're getting 2.5 points. I like taking FAU to cover here on Wednesday.
And for Florida Atlantic, it's going to be very important to check the injury report. I know that they've had Devin Vanterpool and Cannon Carlisle dealing with a little bit of injury as well. If those guys are good to go, that's going to be big for Florida Atlantic moving forward. And what's huge for this podcast is getting on great guests like you, Rob. You do such an amazing job looking at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, I always love coming on here to talk college hoops. And for those who want to follow my bets on a nightly basis, you can do so on Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But As always, Greg, I appreciate having you on, my man.
It's always great to be able to get Rob aboard every single time he joins me. He lends such great insights and did so once again today. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we have some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Craig Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Always great to be joined by Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights and did so once again today. So big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Wednesday as we hit some big shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81, and we are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with most of the bigger conference games up top, all in time order, and then these are the conferences that are going to be covered at the bottom. The Southland, the MEAC, the SWAC, the Big South, the Patriot League. If we were to have any Atlantic Sun action out there, that'll be down there, and I don't think that the NEC is in action, but NEC as well. Let's get things started. 667, 668. Wofford is on the road against VMI. VMI is a home underdog here of 10.5 to 11.5 points. 151.5 is the total, and with Wofford, I can only set them as a 9-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the points. There's a lot of question mark with regards to the top scorer for Wofford in this game, and Kamari Holmes, who's been supplying you with about 19 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, but we have not seen him the last two games, and there's a chance that he might play, but he's listed as day-to-day, and even if he does go, he's probably not going to be 100%. That means that Niles Malachowski, he's your lone double-figure scorer out there on the floor for Wofford. 39.5% three-point shooter, 16.5 points per game. Now, even if you don't have Holmes out there, this team should be a sizable favorite, but that has been factored in mainly because, well, it's a VMI team that's been a wet match in the dark cave, both on offense and on defense. For VMI, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they are 315th in the country. They're a top 15 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point range, and right now, from three-point range, they are 308th in all of college basketball in terms of that percentage at 31.2%. Does go up to 34% at all, man. You have a Wofford team that doesn't necessarily guard the arc, the world's greatest, 281st in the country, but that actually goes down to 32.7% away from home. So that's interesting, and if you do indeed have Holmes out of the fold, you're going to be relying upon Chase Watley, along Kata Vasco, a pair of guys to give you about 9.5 points per contest to be able to step it up, and for VMI, it's very obvious who they're going to need to step up in this game as they've been able to have TJ Johnson become that do-it-all guy, about 18.5 points, 7 boards, and he shoots about 36.5% from three-point range. Pretty much a lone guy on the roster. He shoots about 34.5% from three, other than AJ Clark, who only takes 1.2 threes per game. He gives you about 6.5 points per contest. Tane Yiziglu has been able to give you 4 assists to 2.5 turnovers per game. VMI has been a top 150 team in terms of taking care of the ball, but Wofford, they're also a top 100 team in terms of their ball security as well. So you should be able to get a lot of good, clean possessions in this one. It's not a Wofford team that's looking to push tempo 221st in terms of total possessions per game. VMI, they themselves are clocking at about 247th, but I think that the overall just inefficiency on defense, even if you don't have Holmes in this game, is going to be enough to be able to get you over, as VMI 358th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Wofford a good hearty 297th, and I do think that with VMI having Mario Tatum Jr., Linus Holstrom combining for about 20 points per contest, and you do have Clark, who I mentioned before, give you about 6 rebounds, a little bit over a steal per game. I think that that's just enough for VMI to remain lively here, so set a line of 9. I'm going to take the points with VMI, and I'm going to be in on the over, so I total 153, 669, 670 on the card. South Alabama is going to be on the road against Appalachian State. Appalachian State finds themselves as a 4.5 to a 5.5 point favorite. 129.5 is the total, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with South Alabama. I did set them as a 2-point favorite. For one, if you find yourself in a pressure spot, there's no way that you can trust an Appalachian State to be able to get the cover, and by that I mean Appalachian State, out of 365 teams, they are 365th at the free throw line at 63.1%. That's not good, to say the least, and not that South Alabama is the Mona Lisa Vitos of being able to hit their free throws. They're 350th themselves at 65.9%, but that could be very costly to an over. I did set my total at a 128, and additionally, it's an Appalachian State team that's going to be dared to shoot from three-point range, and they don't really knock down their threes. They shoot 31.6% from three at home, 31.9% overall. That's outside the top 270 in all of college basketball, and that's exactly what this South Alabama team does. South Alabama is right now forcing teams to just huck up threes. That is over 62% of opponents' field goal attempts come from three. That is by far numero uno in all of college basketball. Now, South Alabama has been getting a little bit lambasted on the glass. They don't really grab for themselves second and third chances, but you should get good ball security. Both of these teams in the top 75 in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. You got a South Alabama team that's okay in terms of generating turnovers. They've been a top 125 team with that regard, but not necessarily overly beastly. But for the South Alabama team, Adam Olson and the Chaz Harris have been great. They've been able to combine for about 34 points per game. Olson shoots 38% from three-point range, and for South Alabama, you've been able to have Harris give out 4.5 assists, steal and a half per contest. They've been dealing with the injury to Peyton Law, but you've had Stephen Cooper step up, give you about 6 points, 5 rebounds. Randy Brady only gives you about 5 points, but he chips in there 6 boards, a steal per contest. It's a team that's very much just committed to the collective, and Appalachian State does not allow for good looks either. This is an Appalachian State team that's been a top 30 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and it's a South Alabama team that they themselves are looking to take a lot of twos. They don't take a lot of threes themselves, even though they force you to take threes. And Appalachian State, if you include non-D1 games, a lot of teams only shoot 30% from three-point range themselves, and Appalachian State has been a top 125 team in terms of rebound percentage, with Michael Marcus Jr. give you 8.5 points, 6.5 boards. Luke Wilson, was not an old school, 10.7.5 rebounds per game, and then Alonzo Dodd, Kassan Jennings in the backcourt. These two guys are able to combine for about 28 points per game, and Jennings shoots 37% from three, but the lack of three-point shooting with this Appalachian State team, combined with the fact that they are dead stinking last with their free throw shooting percentage, has me in on South Alabama, set my line at 2, so we'll take the points and made my total a 128. Here at the 129.5, I like the under. 671, 672. Seton is on the road against Villanova. Villanova is a 7.5 point favorite total on this game, anywhere between 132.5 to 133.5, and I do like this under. I set my total 129.5. You're going to be in for a little bit of a slog of a game here, as for Seton, in terms of total possessions, ranking 292nd in the country. You've got Villanova right now checking in 306th, and Seton, they are making the amount of clean possessions in the game even less, with ranking 11th in the country in terms of percentage of opponents' possessions that end in a turnover, and now they get to go up against a Villanova squad that they themselves have been a solid offense. They are 51st in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but that said, this is also a Villanova team that if they are put in a pressure spot, they're 35th in the country in terms of free throw shooting percentage, and here's what Seton does. They dare you to beat you at the free throw line. They are 9th in the country in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per field goal attempted basis on defense when they're away from home. So this is a Seton team that they fell quite a bit with regards to their defense, and it is a Seton team that if you're looking just at overall points allowed on a per possession basis, 12th in the country there. It is a Villanova team that isn't quite as strong on defense, but still solid, 92nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Way that you want to beat this Villanova team is with their three-point shooting, as for Villanova, they have been allowing teams to shoot over 36% from three-point range when they've been at home. It is a Seton team that has had a tough time with their two-point and three-point shooting percentage, as they're 297th in the country with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage. So I do think that's going to be a little bit of a slog of a game, but Stephon Payne, the Payne train, give you 6+ rebounds per game. Najai Hines being able to step up, he's been able to give you about 5.5 to 6 rebounds per game. I think that they hold up here against Duke Brandon, who's going to be the best overall rebounder in this game for Villanova. 12 points, 10.5 rebounds per game. Only one other player for Villanova, though, gives you over 3.8 rebounds per game. That'd be Tyler Perkins with 13 points, 5.5 boards. It is a bunch that has Bryce Lindsey shooting 38.5% per 3, 14 points per game, and Devin Askew, 46% three-point shooter with 10.5 points per game. He's really been able to come alive here in conference play. In conference play, he's actually shooting over 52% from three-point range, but with the style of defense that Seton plays, with the way that Villanova just has not been able to make their free throws, I do think that Seton going to be able to hold in there, and they're going to make this a sloppy, yucky game. I set my total at 129.5. I do like the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the points here with Seton. Did make them an underdog of 3.5 points, 673, 674. Michigan State is going to be on the road against Minnesota, and the state with the smallest strengths in the union, Minnesota, does find themselves as an underdog here of 7 to 7.5 points. 131.5 to 132 is the total, and I like the under. I set my total 129.5. We've got a Michigan State team that's going to be looking to really slow things down, 261st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but Minnesota is even slower, 330th in terms of total possessions per game, and it's a Minnesota defense that has some of the most strange splits that you are ever going to find. As for Minnesota, this is a unit that if you look overall, they're about 102nd in the country with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. You're probably thinking neither here nor there, but they give up 30 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than away from home. Their their points allowed on a per possession basis overall ranking away from home is outside the top 330 in all of college basketball, top 20 at home. So that's wild. And then for Michigan State, this team is overall 11th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home. That goes to number 2, and Michigan State is not allowing second and third chances. Teams are only grabbing about 18.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is tops in the country. Now, Michigan State also has a very strange home and road split with regards to their three-point shooting. They shoot 31.4% from 3 at home, 40.2% away from home. I do think that that's going to start to iron out a little bit, but I do think that Michigan State gets a cover here because you do have Jeremy Fears on your side, 15 points, 9 assists. He doesn't necessarily pop well from 3, but Jackson Kaler, 43% three-point shooter, 13 points, 9 rebounds. He just does it all for the team. You've got Colin Carr, who's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Carson Cooper, 7.5 boards, 10.5 points. You just have weapons upon weapons for this Michigan State team, and they're just like going to the dentist. They're a top 45 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Not a team that's really going to put you under duress and generate a lot of turnovers, and for this Minnesota group, they're not necessarily a team that's going to excel in terms of generating turnovers themselves, and they do have one main scorer, that'd be Cade Tyson, 20 points per game, shoots 38.5% from 3-point range. He's the only other top 4 scorers that shoots above 31.5% from 3, though Bobby Durkin now shooting about 35% from 3, 9 points per game, and then Jalen Crocker-Johnson has versatility, 13.5 points, 7 rebounds per game. It's a Minnesota group that has been a pretty country average team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They do a relatively okay job in terms of thriving down low, top 75 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, and they don't allow a lot of second and third chances on the boards, but they themselves outside the top 250 with regards to their offensive rebound percentage. I think that this is going to be a slow down control game, and I think that Michigan State with their defense, they just pretty much eat Minnesota alive. I set my line to 9.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and I'm going to be in on this under as well. So my total at a 129.5. 675, 676. Central Florida is going to be on the road against Houston. And Houston, a 14.5 to a 15.5 point favorite. 147.5 to 148.5 is the total. And I'm going to be willing to take the points with Central Florida. I did set them as an underdog of 11.5 points. I just really liked what I've seen out of the Central Florida team as they're able to really give an elixir to Houston's main strength on offense. Houston has been a top 20 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, 16th to be exact. Central Florida, they're 18th in the country in terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. And Houston hasn't necessarily shot it well. 135th in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, 137th in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage. So it's a Houston team that's been neither here nor there. Now they're still a top 55 team in terms of points per possession, and Houston is doing an amazing job winning the turnover battle. They're a top 10 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, top 15 unit in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense, but they've also been allowing more second chances than they have in the past. Outside the top 140 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, now Emmanuel Sharp, Kingston Fleming's in the backcourt. They combine for about 33.5 points per contest between the two of them. They shoot 37.5% per 3, and Milo Susan is starting to find it again from 3, shooting 32% per 3, 11.5 points per game. Got off to a rough start to the season, but in conference play has been able to shoot more like 41% from 3. And then Chris Senek, 7.5 boards, 9.5 points. Joseph Tugler, he gives you a block and a half, 8 points, a little bit over 5.5 rebounds per game. But I think that Central Florida is able to hold up here because Central Florida brings in a pair of men from UW Milwaukee and Themis Folks, along with JaMychal Stilwell, who have played really well off of one another. Stilwell, top rebounder with 8 boards, a steal, 12.5 points, and he actually shoots 36% for 3. Folks shoots 45.5% for 3, 14 points per game. These guys have been absolutely magnificent. Now, they do go up against a Houston team that has been very good in terms of guarding the 3-point line. They're allowing teams to shoot about 31.5% for 3, top 100 mark, but I mean, for Central Florida, the 3-point shooting has traveled. They shoot overall 38.2% for 3-point, top 25 mark in all of college basketball. Really takes no drop off when they're away from home. You've gotten good production out of Riley Kugel with about 15 points per contest, and this is a Central Florida team that, with being able to grab those second and third chances, not allowing you to grab second and third chances, they've been a top 35 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Recognize that they leave something to be desired inside. They're outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but I think that they hold in this game. I did think that it's going to be a game that's going to be slowed down as the second and third chances that you typically get on both sides, I think, are going to dry up a little bit. Houston still just 19th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Houston is number 1 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis at home. So I'm in on the under, so I told 143.5, but for Central Florida, made them an 11.5 point dog. I'm going to be willing to take those points. 677, 678. George Washington, our nation's first president, on the road against St. Joe's. St. Joe's hopes to not be average shows. They are 1.5 to 2.5 point underdogs. 153.5 to 154.5 is the total, and I made St. Joe's as a underdog of 7 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for George Washington. This has been an offense that has traveled so well. Currently 28th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis in a road/neutral court venue, and St. Joe's just has not been able to get cooking on offense. They are about 236th in the country. In terms of points per possession, they're a bottom 30 team with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. Now, George Washington outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage in a road/neutral venue, but I still think that George Washington is going to be able to do a nice job winning the battle on the glass, as well as their rebounding is at top 75 mark in all of college basketball in terms of total rebound percentage. Rafael Castro, 16 points, 9 boards, 2 steals, block and a half per contest. He's been oh so versatile. And then you got Trey Autry along Trey Dinkins, who combined for 21 points per game. They both shoot about 40.5% from 3-point range. You've been able to get good production out of Garrett Johnson with about 13 points per game as well. And it's a George Washington unit that they're a solid team in terms of generating turnovers. Top 120 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. You've got a St. Joseph's unit that is not really going to put you under too much duress. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. George Washington has been hovering more around about 200th with regards to those turnovers per possession, so that means more good clean possessions for them. Now, you do have a St. Joe's team that has been solid job though with Justice Ajabor, 5 points, 5 boards, 2.5 blocks per contest, and with Deuce Jones out of the fold, Jaden Glover's had to step up, and he has as the top scorer, 15.5 points per game. But what is really the forte of this St. Joe's defense is being a top 60 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. That gets mitigated quite a bit by the fact that George Washington, they take 46.8% of their field goal attempts from 3-point range away from home. That is 39th in all of college basketball, and away from home they shoot 37.2% from 3. That is 45th in all of college basketball. I think that St. Joe's is going to be facing a little bit of an uphill battle, even with Derek Simpson, Desar Haskins combining for about 24 points per game, and Haskins out shooting 36% from 3-point range. But I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of an up and down game with the George Washington team. They've been looking to push tempo, 93rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, top 80 mark away from home. Did set a total of a 155, so I like the over with St. Joe's. I set them as a 7-point dog, so 1-8 here with George Washington. 679, 680 on the card. It is St. Thomas, and they're going to be on the road facing off against South Dakota State. South Dakota State, a 1.5 point home underdog, 155.5 is the total. And with St. Thomas, I did set them as a favorite of 2 points. I'm willing to lay 1.5 and not half a point more. It is a St. Thomas team that away from home, they've been able to get it going a little bit more from 3-point range. Overall for the season, they shoot 35.9% from 3, 34.8% away from home, so it doesn't suffer too much of a drop off. And St. Thomas just does a really good job in terms of taking care of the ball. In terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, this St. Thomas team checks in number 43 in all of college basketball. You've got a South Dakota State team that they've been able to do a nice job with regards to little things as well. At home, they are much better with their offense than they are away from home. You just take a look at the home and road splits, and it's insane. At home, they're a top 20 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're well outside the top 225 away from home. And South Dakota State, if you look overall for the season, they're 146th in terms of points per possession. Respectable number, but they are scoring 28 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than away from home. And as a matter of fact, they are number 7 in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home. I think that starts to iron out a little bit more. And you do have a St. Thomas team that has been a pretty solid team in terms of generating turnovers. They're a top 135 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They look to play fast, but not warp speed fast. 149th in terms of total possessions per game. South Dakota State, they've been a pretty mid-tempo team, 210th of the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for the St. Thomas team, they do not grab any second or third chances whatsoever. Bottom 5 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, they just hit their first shot as they're a top 10 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. Noel Minsale, 19.5 points, only shoots about 29.5% for 3, but Nick Jankowski, 36% 3-point shooter, 16 points per game, chips in there about 5.5 boards. Carter Bejerke in their last game made 10 threes. He's off shooting 46% for 3, 10.5 points. He's been able to come alive. Austin Hero, yes, of relation to Tyler Hero. He's been able to give you some nice production as well. And then on the flip side for South Dakota State, it's been sort of a just collective. They lose their coach in the offseason, so now you've got Brian Peterson, great name, trying to put his stamp on the program, and you've got a quartet of guys between 11 and 13.5 points per contest. Damon Wilkerson, Jane Jackson, Callum Gary, Joe Saylor. Saylor has been your top scorer with 41% 3-point shooting, 13.5 points, 2.5 assists. Gary is your main facilitator with about 3.3 assists, 11 points. He shoots 39.5% from 3. And for South Dakota State, they've been a relatively okay team in terms of not allowing good interior shots. They're actually a top 30 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from 3-point range, and they allow opponents to shoot 32.5% from 3, slightly above country average. But I think that St. Thomas, with the South Dakota State team not putting you under duress outside the top 240 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and in a pressure spot, South Dakota State only shoots 68.5% of the free throw line. That's right around 300th in all of college basketball. I think that St. Thomas goes on the road, gets the job done in a pretty high scoring game. Semi-total at a 156, or the 155.5. My max 5 point on the over, but it is a 5 point on the over, and I'm willing to lay 1.5 here with St. Thomas. 681, 682. Notre Dame is going to be on the road against Louisville. Louisville is a 17.5 point favorite total on this game, 153.5 to 155.5. I mean, on the under, I set my total at a 151.5. You've got a Notre Dame team that actually does a good job in terms proves a lot of the strength of this Louisville team. Notre Dame is looking to slow things down, 277th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. That falls outside the top 3 in a roadside should score venue, and perhaps you expected a little bit more of the Notre Dame offense. Overall, 144th in the country in terms of points per possession. That takes a drop off about 15 points per 100 possessions fewer away from home rather than at home, but they don't allow second chances. They're 4th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are grabbing less than 22.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and this is a Louisville team that, it's no secret, they love to hoist it away from three-point range. This is a bunch that right now, in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point range, lead the country. 54.4% of those shots come from three, but Notre Dame is 72nd in the country in opponent's three-point shooting percentage at 31.8%. Now, it's a Notre Dame team that has been dealing with quite a bit of injury. Marcus Burton being out of the fold, that has been hurting this team, but you still have guys that are sort of like ancillary pieces. Brandon Shrewsbury, Cole Kurta will be able to step up. These two guys combined for about 22 points per game, and you've got these two guys combined shoot 38% for three, including Shrewsbury over 41% from three. Jalen Harrelson, he's had to take ownership of the offense, 15.5 points, 2.5 assists per game. But if you look at him more in conference play, he's been able to do a nice job leading that way with about 16.5 points per game. And in conference, he's been shooting about 35% from three. And then Carson Tout, he doesn't give you a lot of scoring with only about 6.5 points per game, but 9.5 rebounds per game. And a lot of people wouldn't know this, but this is a Louisville team that does rank in the top 35 in terms of both points allowed on a per possession basis at home and overall rebound percentage, as you've been able to have good production out of Javon Hadley with about 10.5 points, 5.5 boards. You think more of the guard play like Isaac McNeely, Ryan Conwell being able to step up, and certainly Mikal Brown coming back. He's their main facilitator with 5 assists per game. Doesn't necessarily shoot it well from three, but he's been able to make a nice contribution for the team. And then Conwell, he shoots 36% from three. Really good free throw shooting team as well. Each of your top 3 scorers for this Louisville team all shoot at least 80% at the free throw line, so that helps them out. But with the way that Notre Dame is able to lock you down from three, they don't allow a lot of second and third chances. I think that they hold in this game, and a game where Louisville's going to be looking to crank up the tempo. They're not warp speed fast, but they're so fast, 88th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But I think that Notre Dame gets things slowed down and doesn't allow those good looks from three. So I set my line here at a 13.5. I'm willing to take the points with Notre Dame. Made my total 151.5, so I'm in on the under. 683, 684, Wright State. They hope to be the right side on the road against Robert Morris. Old Bobby Morris is a 2.5 point home underdog. 147.5 is the total line. I made Robert Morris a 1.5 point favorite. I do like them on the money line. Now for Robert Morris, the kryptonite of the team has been turnovers. They've been outside the top 245 in terms of ball security, and this is a Wright State team that they do a relatively solid job in terms of generating turnovers. This is a unit that finds themselves in the top 175 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. That ascends into the top 145 when they're away from home, and what this Wright State team has done a really good job of is just bombing it from three-point range away from home. Away from home, they shoot 38.8% from three-point range. That is a top 25 mark in all of college basketball, but for Robert Morris, they do such an excellent job in terms of grabbing second and third chances that I think that wins out here. Robert Morris is a top 15 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, as you got a pair of guys that really clean up the boards. Deshaun Good has been Mr. Good, 15 points, 9 boards. He shoots 61% from three. Should see a little regression there. And Nicolas Chatakoulas, 11 points, 7 boards. He's been able to do a great job there. And then Ryan Prather, all of a sudden, shooting 36% from three, 15 points per contest. Overall, it's a Robert Morris team that's been very solid with their three-point shooting, 36.5%. If you include non-D1 games, that is a top 50 mark in all of college basketball. If you include just only Division I games, they're actually 27th in the country, and they shoot 40.2% from three-point range at home. It is a Wright State team that's been pretty solid in terms of giving themselves a few second and third chances as well. For Wright State, they do find themselves in the top 140 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and it's been all about what Mr. Michael Cooper has supplied for this backcourt, as he's been a bit of a do-it-all guy. He's right now chipping in there about 14.5 points, just under 2.5 assists, shoots 37% from three-point range, and then you've got some ancillary guys in Dominic Pangonis along with Solomon Coughlin, who combine for 20 points per game between the two of them. They shoot about 39.5% from three-point range. It is a Wright State team that has been able to do a lot of the little things well. They are now a top 140 team in terms of their overall defensive rebound percentage. Where they're vulnerable is down low. They are outside the top 225 in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage, but they really force you inside as well. They do not allow you to attempt too many shots from three. They're a top 50 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from two-point range, but with the way that Robert Morris is able to pull in there those second and third chances, I do think that that's going to be just enough to mitigate that and find a way to be able to get the job done here. I do like Robert Morris on the money line, set them as a 1.5 point favorite. I think that you're going to get a relatively decent scoring game. I set my total at a 147.5, so with this total, I'm going to be in on the 148 or higher right now, seeing a 148 out there to the under to go along with Robert Morris. 685, 686. It It is Duquesne. They're going to be on the road against George Mason. George Mason is a 7.5 to an 8.5 point favorite. 146.5 to 147.5 is the total, and I made George Mason the 8.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay 7.5 with them. George Mason has been incredible with their offense. They are now a top 65 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. I will say this, though. They're actually outside the top 100 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis at home. You get them in a road/neutral venue that actually goes into the top 20, so not sure how that works, but this has been a unit that has been able to do a great job in terms of protecting the ball. They're a top 70 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, top 75 3-point shooting team, and for Duquesne, the kryptonite for this team has been the turnovers. 285th in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and you're going to get a tempo award. Duquesne, 26th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. George Mason, 333rd. So it's a good old situation of something's got to give, but I do think that the George Mason offense going to continue to be very prolific, as you've got Corey Mincy along Jahari Long, who have been great from the outside, with Mincy your top scorer, 17 points, for rebounds, shoots 43% from 3. Long shoots 36% from 3, 11 points, 3.5 assists per game, and for George Mason, they've been a really good team on the boards as well. They're a top 100 team with regards to overall rebound percentage, a top 75 unit with regards to not allowing second and third chances, and with their overall shooting percentages, they're a top 115 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, so they've been able to do a nice job in terms of checking a lot of those boxes, and for Duquesne, it's going to be very big what Mr. Jonathan Hughley is going to be able to bring to the table, as he was dealing with a little bit of an injury. You may recall he was a top scorer over at Pittsburgh a few seasons ago, 12 points, 5 boards, missed 6 games. He's back, and he's able to shoot about 32% from 3 at 6'9"-ish, and then Terrence Gounier, Jimmy Williams, these are your top 2 scorers. They combine for 32 points per game. Between the two of them, they're shooting about 38% for 3, and Gounier gives you 5.5 assists per game, but again, those turnovers are so costly. Now, this is also a top 150 team in terms of generating turnovers as well, and they've been able to execute on the inside. This is a top 55 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, and Duquesne, for their 3-point shooting, I mean, it's solid. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's amazing or anything like that, but Duquesne right now as a whole, they're shooting in that pocket of about 35% from 3-point. That goes up to 36.5% away from home, but I do think that George Mason, a team that is built around defense, they're going to be able to find it a little bit more here. I do think that they slow down Duquesne with those turnovers, and I think that that's just enough for them to be able to get the job done and get you the under. Semi-total 146.5, so 147 plus. I'm in on the under, and with George Mason, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8 with them. 687, 688. Arkansas State, they're on the road against Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina is a home underdog of 1.5 to 2.5 points. Total on scheme, 153.5 to 154.5, and for Coastal, I did set them as a underdog here of 4.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Arkansas State. Arkansas State's weakness has been turnovers. They are a bottom 35 team in terms of ball security. They turn the ball over on over 19% of their possessions, but Coastal Carolina, 365 Division I teams, 364th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Now, Coastal Carolina is a pretty good 3-point shooting team at home. They shoot 38.5% for 3 at home compared to 31.1% away from home. And Arkansas State, not a team that's really going to light you up from 3. They only shoot about 31.3% from 3 overall, which is 303rd, though. It does go up to about 32.2% when they're away from home, but I think that this team is going to thrive down low, even though Coastal Carolina has been a top 40 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. It's an Arkansas State team that they've been able to do a nice job with regards to their interior offense. They're, in terms of offensive rebound percentage, a top 10 team in a road/neutral venue. In a road/neutral venue, they're a top 35 team in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage as well. And let's say that you get into a pressure spot. It's an Arkansas State team that shoots it really well from the free throw line as well. 78.5% away from home. That's a top 40 mark, and it's just a really good collective with this team. You've got 8 different guys that give between 6.1 and 12 points per game. Now you've got really one of your top 3-point shooters in Joey Chema, who was dealing with an injury for about 11 games back. He shoots 35.5% for 3, 10 points per game. Kyle Amon, he leads the way with 12 points, shoots 90% of the free throw line. Doesn't necessarily pop at the world's greatest from 3-point range, but with Coastal Carolina not generating any turnovers whatsoever, that means that there should be some good clean possessions for this Arkansas State team, and it's a Coastal team that's probably going to be sped up. Coastal Carolina right around about 190th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Arkansas State is absolutely looking at gunning it right now. It's 33rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Coastal has some nice players themselves, as you've got Joshua Beadle, who's able to give you 16 points per game. It's a top 100 team in terms of protecting the ball. They're just really not good on the inside. This Coastal Carolina team is outside the top 300 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Now they've done a nice job in terms of controlling the boards as well. In terms of their defensive rebound percentage, this is a top 100 team in the country, as you've been able to get 5.5 rebounds a piece out of AJ Dantzler, along with Reggie Hill. And for Dantzler, he actually shoots 38% from 3, 15.5 points per game. Rashid Jones, 2-all guy, 5 boards, 3 assists, 15 points, shoots 40% from 3. But with the way that Arkansas State is able to bring things together with them not being under duress with those turnovers, I think that Arkansas State speeds things up. I think that they get the job done. So I'm at a line of 4.5, full and delay with Arkansas State, and like the over, semi-total at a 158.5. 689, 690 on the card. It is Furman, and they're going to be on the road facing off against East Tennessee. East Tennessee, 5.5 to 6.5 point favorites. Total on this game, it is between 143 to 143.5, and I did make a total here of a 145. I like the over, mainly because Furman is just so good with their interior offense. I think that it gets you over. In games played away from home, they are 4th in the country in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, and it is an ETSU team that has been very good in terms of generating turnovers. Overall, ETSU, top 65 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Top 60 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and I do think that that's the ultimate undoing for Furman. Furman, 270th in terms of ball security, and it's an ETSU team that they're just a really well-rounded team that does a great job on the boards as well. They're not going to allow a lot of second and third chances. For East Tennessee State, in terms of defensive rebound percentage, they are 35th in all of college basketball. Teams are only grabbing about 24.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and I like what you've been able to get out of your main two scorers, as Brian Taylor has been able to throw in there about 14.5 points per contest, and then Cam Morris, he gives you 15 points, 5 boards. Taylor throws in there about 4 rebounds and 3 assists per game as well, but then you got Morris shooting 36% from 3. Blake Barkley is a 37% 3-point shooter, but out of all the guys on the roster, I would say your most critical might actually be Alan Strothers, who only gives you 4 points per game, but 3.3 assists, 1.3 steals. He's really like the floor general for this team, even though he doesn't score. He helps facilitate good, clean offense. For an ETSU team that's been a top 40 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage as well, so they do a nice job down low. For ETSU, they've been a top 55 team in terms of taking care of the ball, so even though they're a slow team, they're outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. And Furman's a little bit faster, but they're not looking to play fast themselves. They're about 248th in terms of total possessions per game, approximately 298th for ETSU, by the way. But for Furman, I do think that they hold in there with the way that Alex Wilkins has been able to come alive as a freshman. He gives you about 18.5 points, shoots 32.5% from 3, and they've needed it because Cooper Bowser has been missing for 10 games. He's one of their top returners from a season ago. Just got back out there on the floor against Chattanooga. Played 24 minutes, so it's a little bit limited there, but should be a little bit closer to 100% here. And then you got Asa Thomas, who's been missing for the last few weeks as well. He should be still out for this game, but Bowser's going to be able to give them a little bit more down low. And then Charles Johnson, 10 points, 10 boards. He doesn't necessarily pop a well from 3, and Furman is collective. They only shoot about 32.5% from 3-point range, but they have been a top 175 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. ETSU, I think, is going to be able to take that away, and this has been an ETSU team that has been balanced, top 150 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. I think that that's enough to get it done, but I do think that with Furman being able to get Bowser back out there on the floor, that's going to be just enough to be able to get you that over. So set ETSU as a 9-point favorite, one to lay with East Tennessee. I like the over. I set my total at a 145, 691, 692. Youngstown State is on the road against Fort Wayne, and Fort Wayne does find themselves as a 2.5 to a 3.5 point favorite. 147.5 is the total line. For Fort Wayne, I made them a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number. The name of the game for Fort Wayne is being able to win the turnover battle, as this is a unit that, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, they're 21st in the country. They do a really good job in terms of protecting the ball. Now, it doesn't necessarily lead to the world's greatest offense. They're about 186th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, mainly because this team gets dump trucked down the glass. They are a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of rebound percentage, both on the offensive and defensive glass. They get it taken to them, but this has also been a unit that has done a great job in terms of generating turnovers. In terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they are 43rd in the country, and Youngstown State has had a few ball control issues as well, and they also do a solid job in terms of generating turnovers. In games played away from home, Youngstown State, a top 65 unit in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and Youngstown State, they're not necessarily the world's greatest 2-point shooting team, but they have been a team that has been able to come alive a little bit with their 3-point shooting percentage. Overall for the season, Youngstown State, they shoot about 33.5% from 3. That's hovering right around about 200th in all of college basketball. And Purdue Fort Wayne, they really do rely upon the 3 ball. They shoot about 38.5% from 3-point range at home. And for Youngstown State, they are going to have by far the best low post presence in this game, as you've got a true 7-footer in Emmanuel Zugaloff, who gives you 6.5 points. Now, he only gives you 2.6 rebounds per game, but he throws in there 2 blocks per contest. And then Chris Carroll is caroling all the way to being the team's top scorer, 17.5 points, 5 boards. He shoots 43% from 3-point range. Rich Rolfe has been able to shoot about 38% from 3-point range as well. And then Bryson Dawkins, he throws in there about 12 points per game for a Youngstown State team that has been a top 100 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, top 175 unit in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting shooting percentage, and they certainly are going to have the leg up with regards to being able to grab second and third chances. Purdue, Fort Wayne, they're not grabbing any of them whatsoever. And then for this Youngstown State team, in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, they're about 102nd in all of college basketball. But I do think that for Purdue, Fort Wayne, the big way that they're going to be able to get it done is with their big three in the backcourt, as Corey Hadnot is right now your top scorer, 20 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, shoots about 35.5% from 3, and then Mikhail Stevenson, DeAndre 3000 Craig. They combine for 29.8 points per game. Craig shoots 40% from 3 with about 3 assists, stealing half per contest. Stevenson, 3.5 assists, 1.7 steals, shoots 36% from 3-point range. On this roster, you really don't have anyone that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. Darius Duffy, 4.7 rebounds per game. He leads the way, but I do think that for Purdue, Fort Wayne, with what they're able to do out there in the backcourt, and Youngstown State sometimes being a little bit careless with the ball, I think that's just enough for Purdue, Fort Wayne to be able to get the job done in a mid-tempo game that should see some good offensive execution. For Youngstown State, about 196th in terms of total possessions per game. Fort Wayne, 150th, made a total of a 150, so like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 3.5 here with Fort Wayne. 693, 694, it's Butler on the road against Providence. Providence is a favorite of between 2.5 to 3.5 points. Dawn's game, it is 170.5, and I made a total of a 167.5. I'm in on the under. Now, this is going to be a very up-tempo game. Providence, in terms of total possessions per game, they are 7th in all of college basketball. Butler, a little bit slower, but not much, 53rd in the country. In terms of total possessions per game, have been slowing down here in conference play, though, and for Butler, the name of the game for this team is being able to win the rebound battle and grab second and third chances. They grab about 33.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is 51st in all of college basketball. And Providence has been unsightly bad on the glass. They're outside the top 150 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, even though they've got Oswin, can't pronounce his last name, give you about 7 rebounds, 2.5 blocks per contest. And for this Providence group, you do have a really good 1-2 punch in the backcourt. Have to love what you've been able to get out of both Jalen Sellers along with Jason Edwards. These two guys combine for about 33.5 points per game, and they both shoot above 35.5% from 3-point range. But Edwards has been a little bit banged up. We haven't seen him over the last few weeks, and he's probably going to be out once again. That means that Stefan Vox, who's been able to do a nice job of stepping up in his absence, he's given the team 14 plus points in 4 of the last 5 games. Overall for the season, shoots about 33% from 3, but that means that more is going to be asked of him. And then you've had Corey Floyd Jr. be a hit or miss guy, 8.5 points, 4.5 boards, 2.5 assists, shoots 39% from 3, but sometimes can disappear in games. And on the Butler side of things, you've had Michael Jai do a really good job down low. It's not been able to find that 3-point shooting pop that he had over at Pepperdine a few seasons ago, but 16 points, 11 boards, he only shoots 28.5% per 3, but Finley Bizjack is Bizjacking teams with about 17 points, shoots 36% from 3-point range. But I did have to set Butler here as a 3.5-point underdog because they don't put you under duress. Really, neither of these teams do. Both of these teams outside the top 250 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and there's one thing that Providence has been able to do an okay job of on defense, and Providence is outside the top 240 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're top 100 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They themselves are a top 60 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, and in a pressure spot, Providence shoots 77.6% on the free throw line. That's a top 25 mark in the country. Butler 70.8%. That's outside the top 200. I think that could be a big X factor, even with having Jamie Kaiser give you about 10 points, give you about 4.5 rebounds per game as well. So circumstance where I did set my total at a 167.5, like the under with Providence, we'll lay up to 3 with them. 695, 696 on the card. It is Western Carolina. They're going to be on the road against UNC Greensboro, and Greensboro finds themselves as a very slim underdog of 1 to 1.5 points. So on this game, 156.5, and I did set my total at 156, so 156.5. Bare bones minimum by a point on the under, as you've got a Greensboro team that is mid-tempo, 178th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Western Carolina, they're looking to bump up tempo a little bit more at 106th in terms of total possessions per game, but they have been slowed down here in conference play, and to the credit of Western Carolina, they've been able to work on the turnover issue. They're outside the top 240 still in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but here in conference play, they've only been turning the ball over about 9.5 times per game. I think that might go up a little bit, and a little bit of a byproduct of the competition, but still, they're doing a better job there. You've had Julian Swarmo do a nice job in the backcourt with about 12 points, shoots 37.5% from 3, but this is still a Western Carolina team that is shaky with their 3-point shooting. They shoot 32.5% from the outside. That's outside the top 240 in all of college basketball. If you do find yourself in a nip and tuck spot, this team may only shoot about 70% at the free throw line, and it's outside the top 250 in all of college basketball, though they do a nice job in terms of grabbing second and third chances. Western Carolina, top 100 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and for Greensboro, 268th in all of college basketball with that regard, so that's been a little bit less than tremendous, but that's it for Western Carolina. They themselves are going to allow a few second and third chances as well away from home. They allow teams to grab about 29.4% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound compared to 21% at home, so that's actually a very big divide, And Western Carolina, they just absolutely give it up from three-point range. This Western Carolina team, in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, 350th in all of college basketball. It's not a Greensboro team that is any good on defense either. They're well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they are 345th in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. But this is a Greensboro team that they themselves are a pretty good three-point shooting team. They're overall shooting about 36.2% from three-point range at home, and it's all about what you've been able to get out of Justin Neely to really be the head of the snake for the team. He's a little bit of a point forward for the team as he does it all. He's able to give you 2.5 assists, 16.5 points, 11.8 rebounds per game, and then off the ball you've got William Marvel, who shoots 52% for three with 9 points per contest. KJ Younger along Donald White at junior, they've been able to combine for 26 points. They only should have combined about 31.5% from three, but Noah Nogard has really stepped up. He's been able to give you 7 points on 40% three-point shooting, and it's a Greensboro team that they're not going to put you under duress. They're a bottom 10 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're also a top 75 unit in terms of generating turnovers themselves. Both of these teams are a little bit suspect at the free throw line in a tight spot. Greensboro 68.5% of the charity stripe, that's just outside the top 300. You've got Western Carolina at 69.9%, so relative equals there, but I do think that in the end, Greensboro on their own floor, they do just enough to be able to get the job done because they do a better job in terms of protecting the ball. So set a total of 156 at the 156 half, like the under, and I'd like Greensboro on the money line, 697, 698. The men of Troy are going to be on the road against Georgia State. Georgia State, a 4.5 point home underdog, 145.5 is the total, and for Georgia State, I did set them as an underdog of 5 points. So at the 4.5, that's my max lay with Troy, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. It's a Troy group that has been good in terms of generating second and third chances away from home. In a road/core venue, this is a top 55 team in terms of percentage of the missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and this is a Georgia State team that has had quite a few issues down low. Now, Georgia State, they're going to be very much looking to be able to get to the free throw line because that's where this team really shines. They're actually fifth in the country in terms of free throw shooting percentage at 79.7%, and this is a unit that is going to be willing to put you on the free throw line in Troy. This is a Troy bunch that is a bottom 100 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per field goal attempted basis, so they are going to be able to put you a little bit more on the free throw line. Now, it's a Georgia State team that has just done absolutely nothing down low. In terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, Georgia State is outside the top 350 in all of college basketball, and they're still shooting just 31.1% from 3-point range. That is 309th in all of college basketball, so if you look at raw points scored on a per possession basis, it's a Georgia State team that's 327th in all of college basketball, but it's been significantly better here in conference play, and the big reason why is that they were dealing with an injury early on to the season in Jelani Hamilton. He's your top scorer, 18.5 points, 2 steals, shoots 91% of the free throw line, 35% from 3. He was dealing with ailment throughout much of non-conference play, and ever since he's been able to come back in conference play, things have been able to ascend for this team. And then you've got Malachi Brown, Micah Tucker. They combine for about 23 points per game, and they combine to shoot about 35.5% from 3. Again, you just don't have a lot of low post presence for the team. Joel Chappelle has been able to give you 5.5 boards, 7.5 points per game. One guy on the roster that gives you over 5.1 rebounds per game, and that's going to be quite an issue going against Thomas Dowd. And for Dowd, he's been incredible for this Wright team. Right now, averaging a double-double, 14.9 points, 7.3 boards, a block, a steal, and a per contest, and he shoots 36% from 3. And then the Campbell brothers, Kobe and Cooper Campbell, they combine for 22.5 points per contest. Kobe shoots 44% from 3. He gives you about a steal per contest, and then Cooper is your main facilitator with 5 assists, steal, and a per contest. Victor Valdez, not an amazing three-point shooter, but he throws in there 16 points per game as well. And for this Georgia State team, they're a relatively mid-tempo team, 180th in terms of total possessions per game. Troy is 43rd, but warp set. They play that triple overtime game against USC, double overtime game as well against San Diego State. If you take those out of the fold, they're probably closer to like 100th in terms of possessions per 40 minutes, but it is a Troy team that is going to be able to put you under quite a bit of duress. Still a solid team in terms of generating turnovers. They're not quite where they were 8 seasons ago, but in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, they're still a top 135 team in the country, top 100 away from home, and I think that that's just enough to get the job done here. I did set my total at a 147.5. Georgia State again playing much better on offense here in Sunbelt play, so like the over and a little 8 to 4.5 with the men of Troy. 699, 700 on the card. UW Green Bay is on the road against Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky is a 7 to a 7.5 play favorite total on this game, 151.5. And for Northern Kentucky, I set them as a favorite of 5.5 points. I'm going to be one to take the points with Green Bay. Now it's a Green Bay defense that is all sorts of ghastly, and they are not going to put you under duress. 356th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Northern Kentucky will. They are 57th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. basis generated on defense, but at home they're outside the top 100. They're not generating as many turnovers when they're at home, and this is a UW Green Bay team that honestly has been able to do a very solid job with their offense. They're a top 65 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage at 36.2%. They're a top 75 team in terms of taking care of the ball. If you look at just raw points scored on a per possession basis, this is actually 102nd in all of college basketball, and they ascend just barely into the top 100 when they're away from home. Now, it's a very slow UW Green Bay team as well. They're about 341st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Northern Kentucky, they're 89th, so Northern Kentucky is looking to bump up tempo, and again, with this UW Green Bay team, they're a bottom 35 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, getting land-based from 2-point range, getting land-based from 3-point range, so you're going to get a lot of open shots there. But for UW Green Bay, you've got a quartet of guys that gave between 11.8 and 13.8 points per contest. Preston Rudinger, who's your top 3-point shooter at 44.5% from 3, and also is now giving out 5.5 assists per game. Marcus Hall is your top scorer, 13.5 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists. CJ O'Hara, 13.5 points, 4.5 boards, and then you've had Justin Allen step up, give you about 12.5 points per game. So for UW Green Bay, they are doing those little things well. And then for Northern Kentucky, it's been a group that has had Mr. LJ Wells do a very well job down low, as he's been giving you 8 rebounds per game. He is by far the best rebounder in this game, about 14 points per contest. And then you've got a trio of other guys, Khalil Robinson, Dan Gresinger, and Donovan Ode, that give you between 13.9 and 18.5 points per game. Ode, more of that just do-it-all guy, 2 steals, 2 assists, 4 boards, 18.5 points per game. And then Robinson shoots 40% from 3. But Northern Kentucky now shooting about 33.5% from 3. That's just below country average. They really feast on the inside. They've been a top 50 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and Green Bay gives you no second chances. They're outside the top 340 with regards to their offensive rebound percentage. Not bad in terms of not allowing teams to be able to grab second and third chances, and with this Northern Kentucky team being hovering right around 300th in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, I think that that's enough for Green Bay to hold in there in a game that I think is going to be a little bit slowed down, but very efficient on offense. Semi-total 155.5, like the over, and the points here with Green Bay. 7-1, 7-2. Texas State is on the road against Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern is a 3.5 point favorite total on this game. It is 151.5, and I did set a total here of a 153. I like the over. Texas State has been playing faster than they have in past seasons. Not to say that they're super extreme, but they're about 200th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Georgia Southern is looking to absolutely gun it, though. They are 20th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. It's a Georgia Southern team that is neither here nor there with their shooting. They leave a little bit of something to be desired with regards to their 3-point shooting. Overall, they're about 174th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Texas State is 281st. The biggest issue for Texas State is their turnover issues. They're outside the top 310 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and they're looking to cash in down low. This is a Texas State team that they're just 280th with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, but in terms of percent of their shots that come from 2-point range, are actually a top 5 team in the country. They do not want to be taking threes whatsoever, and this is a Georgia Southern group that, if you take a look at their 2-point shooting defense, they have been a team that has been leaving a lot to be desired. At home, they are outside the top 275 with this regard, so I do think that that keeps Texas State relatively lively. I did set my line here at a 7, so it is a case where I still think that Texas State, with the turnover issues, I think that that's going to be a little bit too much. And you do have a Georgia Southern team that I do like what you've been able to get out of Spud Webb in the backcourt, who's been able to lead the way with about 16 points per contest. It is a Texas State team that, even though they actually don't shoot at the world's worst from 3-point range, they shoot about 32.5% from 3. You just don't take too many of them. DJ Hall, Mark Drone, they've been able to combine for 28 points per game. They're your lone 2 double-figure scores. Hall is able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. And to the credit of Texas State, they've been a top 100 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage, but they do leave themselves vulnerable from 3. They're just outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and I do think that for Georgia Southern, being able to get back Tyron Moore, who's been able to give you 14.5 points, he throws in there about 2.5 assists, shoots 35.5% from 3. That's going to be a big X factor. Additionally, for Georgia Southern, this has been a top 80 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, so not a lot of clean possessions to be had here for Texas State, and it's a Georgia Southern team that's going to put you on the free throw line. Top 50 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. For Texas State, to their credit, they shoot about 74.9% of the free throw line. That is a top 100 mark in all of college basketball, which is a big reason why I like the over. But for Texas State, I do think that the overall sloppiness is going to be able to cost them. And then additionally, Alden Applewhite has been good with his versatility for this Georgia Southern team. A little bit over a steal, 12.5 points, 6 rebounds. I think that that's going to be tough for this Texas State team to be able to match up with. And Georgia Southern, they themselves are a top 40 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. So they do a nice job getting to the free throw line. Country average shooting about 72.2% at the free throw line. but I think that's enough to be able to get it done in this circumstance. Semi-total at 153, so I'm going to be willing to lay with Georgia Southern, made them a 7-point favorite, and I'm in on the over. 703, 704, Southern Miss is going to be on the road against Marshall, and Marshall is a favorite of 8.5 to 9.5 points. 148.5 is the total, and for Southern Miss, I did make them a underdog here of 13 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with Marshall. For Southern Miss, it's been a case where they've been missing one of their top two guys, as now they're having to really rely upon Tyreek Wilkes, who's been solid. 18 points, 6 boards, pair of assists per contest, but they've been without Isaac Tavares, who was their number 2 scorer for much of the season with about 15.5 points per game, and that really hurts them because they have absolutely no three-point shooting whatsoever. Out of their top 4 players that are currently healthy, none of them shoot above 28.6% from 3 as a team. As a collective, shoots 28.6% from 3 out of 365 teams, 365th. That is not great, to say the least. And I mean, this is a team that's looking to pile drive the ball down low. They're 9th in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from inside the three-point line, and they've been a top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Here's the issue that you've got. Marshall is a top 60 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they've got 7'4" Matthew Van Kamen, and he's a shot blocking machine. So they're also a top 15 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that get blocked as well. So they're very good on the interior. You've also got a Marshall team that at home they're shooting over 40.5% from three-point range at home. That is a top 20 mark in the country. And Southern Miss 328th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Jalen Spear, Wyatt Fricks, these two guys combined for about 28.5 points per contest. They combined to shoot about 36% from 3, but then you've got Caleb Hollenbeck, who's been able to shoot 40% from 3 with about 7 points per contest. Landon Joseph shoots 39% for 3 with 6 points per game. These ancillary pieces have been great. And then the 7'4" Van Kamen, about 8 points, 2.5 blocks, 7.5 rebounds per game. He has been just outstanding for this team. Right now for Southern Miss, they've been looking to Dejai Benoit down low. He's been able to give you about 10 points, 7.5 boards, just under a block and a steal per contest. But other than Kurt Lewis, who shoots 37.5% from 3 with about 6 points per game, nobody with more than 4 points per game is shooting above 29% from 3. That just lack of an outside presence, along with Southern Miss being unable to take care of the ball outside the top 240 in terms of their own ball security, I think is going to cost them in this one. And I think that allows Marshall to be able to get the job done. Did set a total of a 149. I think Marshall hits just enough threes for the over, so like the over, and I'm willing to lay it here with the Thundering Herd of Marshall. 7-5, 7-6. Oakland is on the road against Cleveland State, and Cleveland State a underdog here of 7 to 7.5 points. 170 to 171.5 is the total. Did set a total of 169.5. I'm going to be in on the under, mainly because this is an Oakland team that has been a much better three-point shooting defense than they have been in the past. Typically, this Oakland team just absolutely gets wrecked from the outside. This season, 117th in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. It doesn't sound like anything grandiose or anything like that, but it's a lot better than where they have been in the past. In Cleveland State, at home, they only allowed opponents to shoot actually 29.5% from three-point range. That is a top 100 mark in all of college basketball, so I do think that does just enough to keep you under, and a game that should see some tempo. Cleveland State, 77th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Oakland is 61st, and I'm not going to sit here and say that these are two amazing defenses or anything like that. You've got a Cleveland State team that, by the way, will not put you under duress. Same with Oakland. Both of these teams outside the top 270 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and Oakland overall 307th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Cleveland State a good hearty 362nd, but for Oakland they're inside the top 275 when they get away from home. And for Oakland, I did set them here as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm willing to lay up to 7 because I think that Brody Robinson is going to do a nice job in terms of leading them to victory. He's been very good coming over from UT Arlington. 6 assists, 16.5 points, shoots 36% from 3, and it's an Oakland team that's actually a top 60 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range. They've been right around about 150th in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They will give up a lot of second and third chances on the glass. They've been outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but they're still relatively efficient with that low post play with Michael Hoagie, Bari Navarula, along with Isaac Garrett, combining for about 19 rebounds per game. All three guys give you between 13.4 and 14.7 points per game, and then on the flip side for Cleveland State, you just really don't have much of a low post presence for the team, and they very much rely upon going bombs away from 3. They shoot at 38.5% from 3. That's a top 25 mark in all of college basketball, and with Design Nasai being able to give you 15.5 points, 6.5 boards, and a steal per contest gives you some versatility. He shoots 35% from 3, and then Trey Beard has shot 45% from 3. He's flying the team with about 14 points per contest, but outside of Nasai, you've only got one other player that gives you over 4 rebounds per game. That'd be Josiah Harris, who's been able to give you 8.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. game. He's been dealing with injury all throughout the season. Should be good to go here, but has been a little bit limited in these recent games. And with Cleveland State, they've had a tough time in terms of taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 275 in terms of their own ball security. And I do think that Oakland goes on the road, gets the job done in this ordeal. Set my line at a 7.5, so 1 to 7 with Oakland. And so my total 169.5. I like the under. 7-7, 7-8 on the card. You've got Liberty, and they're going to be on the road against Delaware. And old Liberty, a sizable road favorite here of 11.5 to 12.5 points. 132.5 to 133.5 is the total. And for Liberty, I did set them as a favorite of 11.5 points. So 12 plus, I'm going to be willing to take those points. It's a Delaware team that's not going to give you any second chances. And really, neither of these teams are going to be able to hit the offensive boards. You'll look at both of these teams, and they're both outside the top 335 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that results in an offensive rebound, as these two teams really rely upon their three-point shooting. Liberty, 6th in the country with their three-point shooting percentage. They shoot 40.2% from three-point. It is a Delaware team that's been relatively good with their three-point shooting percentage as well. For Delaware, overall for the season, they do check in 69th in the country. They shoot about 35.9% from the outside, but for this Delaware team, they are also a team that has been very lackadaisical with regards to just being able to have consistency and in terms of being able to take care of the ball in general. For Delaware, in terms of a percentage of their possessions that end in a turnover, they're outside the top 240 there, and they don't generate any turnovers. They're outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They actually shoot it well at the free throw line at 75%, but they're a bottom 15 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. And for Delaware, it's been all about Christian Bliss and Justin Fernandez, who have been able to combine for 30 points per game. Both shoot about 38.5% from three. McCone Emery, he's been your top rebounder with about 7 boards, 11 points per game. Just a very top-heavy lineup with having Jameel Brown, Mason Ellison going out with injury early on during the season. So they've had to really rely upon their main starting five, and they just don't have a lot of depth right now. And this has been a unit that has been actually relatively solid with regards to their interior defense, top 125 team in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. But against a Liberty team that shoots it so well from 3-point range, it has been a little bit deplorable what we've been seeing out of this Delaware just 3-point shooting defense, as right now they're allowing teams at home to shoot 34.9% from 3-point range. That is outside the top 235 in all of college basketball. And I do think that Liberty is going to be able to take full advantage with this Liberty team. You've got Brett Decker, who's shooting darn near 50% from 3-point range. He's been one of the biggest flamethrowers in the country with about 17.5 points per game. And then you've had Caden Metheny give you 14 points, shoots 40% from 3. But I mean, really the guy that makes this engine run is at Cleveland. He doesn't take any threes whatsoever, but 11 points, 8 boards, 7 assists, steal and a half, block and a half per contest at right around about 6'9". I do think that this summer is getting a little bit too lofty, though. Delaware has been a top 225 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. The Liberty offense does take a little bit of a drop off away from home, and it's a Liberty team that they themselves have not been necessarily the greatest team in terms of being able to guard the arc. Right now for Liberty, they are allowing teams to shoot about 36% from 3. That's 288th in the country. I think that does just enough for Delaware to hold alive, and for Liberty, 344th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Delaware, they are outside the top 300 themselves at 355th, so I think that you're in for a turtle race. Did semi-total at a 133.5. Right now at the 132.5, 133, I think you get just enough made threes for the over, so like the over and the points with Delaware, 7-9, 7-10. It's Tulsa on the road against Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic is a home underdog of 1.5 to 2.5 points. Total game 165.5. I'm going to be in on Tulsa. I did set my line at 3.5. It is a Tulsa offense that has just been so explosive in terms of their offense. You take a look at them in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and this team is 4th in the country there in games played away from home. That actually goes up to 3rd. And for Florida Atlantic, right now you just have a lot of question mark as to what you're going to be able to get out of your main 2 scorers, as Cannon Carlisle has been dealing with a little bit of injury, was able to get out there in their last game, but certainly did not look like himself a few nights ago when they were taking on East Carolina, played 16 minutes, and he had as many points as myself. And then Devin Vanterpool has been dealing with a little bit of ailment as well. He played against East Carolina, and he looked much better. He had 16 points in that game, so he should be all good to go. But with Carlisle, he's a guy that's able to shoot you into a game. He's able to shoot you out of a game. And then for this Florida Atlantic team, what has been so key for them is being able to own the glass. It's a top 75 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. They've been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of not allowing a ton of second and third chances as well, but they don't really take care of the ball. They're outside the top 235 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and they're outside the top 240 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Now, they do a nice job on the inside top on our team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and Devin Williams, 7.5 points, 5 boards, 2.5 blocks per contest. He might be one of the better low post presence in this game, but for Tulsa, you've got a few guys that are forwards that don't necessarily score a lot, but they do a nice job down low. Ian Smichael has been able to give you about 4 points, 4 boards per contest. Tyler Bennard, he's able to give you about 4.5 rebounds, 6 points per game. So while Tulsa's main forte is on offense, as they're a top 10 team in terms of both their 3-point shooting percentage and their free throw shooting percentage, and and are in the top 50 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage as well. This has been a squad that's been able to do a solid job on the glass. They're a top 125 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They pull in there enough second and third chances to remain lively there as well. They've been a top 100 team with regards to 2-point shooting percentage. And then you've got your big three, Tylen Riley, Miles Barnstable, and David Green. Between these three guys, you're able to get about 46.5 points per game. All shoot at least 40% from three. Riley and Barnstable both shoot above 89% at the free throw line. I think that that's enough for Tulsa to be able to get the job done in a game that I think is going to be relatively mid-tempo. Right now for Tulsa, they're about 201st in the country in terms of total possessions rate. Florida Atlantic is 50th, but a little bit of a warp set because they have played quite a few overtimes thus far this season. I did set Tulsa here as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. With Florida Atlantic being impacted by the injuries, I did set my total 157.5. I mean on the under, 7-11, 7-12. It's Texas A&M on the road against Alabama. Alabama is a home favorite here of 7.5 to 8.5 points. So it's game between 178.5 to 180.5, and I did set Alabama as a 9-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Now, Texas A&M, what they've been able to do is absolutely incredible. This is a squad that is just so balanced, 13th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and the defense has really been able to travel for Texas A&M as well. You take a look at Texas A&M and the way that they give it up from three-point range at home, and it's a little bit rough, but away from home, teams shoot 25.7% from three against them compared to 36.9% at home. I'm thinking that that's a stat that is going to be very much ironing out, and I think that that happens against an Alabama team that's in the top 15 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point range. Alabama, overall, they shoot about 35.4% from three at home, 34.8% away from home, so there's good balance there. And then you've got LeBaron Filan, who's able to give you 22.5 points per contest, throws in their 3+ assists per game, shoots a hair below 37% from three-point range. Now, for Texas A&M, it's been a whole greater than the sum of its parts approach. Even with Mackenzie Mbakbo out of the fold, you've got 6 different guys between 7.9 and 13.9 points per game, with Rashawn Agee actually being your top man, 14.9 rebounds per game. One guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, but has been a unit that has been a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage. They have been in the top 55 with their 2-point shooting percentage. Demi Gash inside, they're outside the top 150 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they're not trying to put you on the free throw line because they're a top 20 team in terms of generating turnovers, but it is an Alabama team that one thing that they have been able to do an amazing job of on offense is taking care of the ball. Even though this Alabama team is a top 10 team in terms of total possessions per game, they're also a top 30 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And this is going to be a very up-tempo game. You've got an Alabama team that's 6th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Texas A&M, they are right there. They are number 13 in the country, but I do think they can get a little bit of an under because Charles Bediako has been able to give this team a little bit more down low. 11 points, right around about 5 rebounds per game. He's getting acclimated back with this bunch, and it's very weird to say that he's playing college basketball once again, but still, you've been able to have good backcourt play. I recognize that Aiden Holloway was dealing with a little bit of an injury, but he's back. He had 19 points in that game against Florida, and he overall this season shooting 45% from three. Taylor Bowen went out in that game against Florida, and I would not expect him to play here, so that had to be factored in as well, but I do think that even with him deal with a little bit of ailment, I do think that the way that this Alabama team is able to take care of the ball, that's going to be big for them, and for this Alabama team, even though they're not the most elite defense in the world because they don't generate any turnovers. They're outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They do a nice job in terms of guarding the 3-point line. Teams are shooting just 31.1% from three against them, and I do think that Texas A&M can have a little bit of difficulty with that. I think that that's just enough for Alabama to be able to get the job done, even though you have been seeing Pop Isaacs really coming alive for Texas A&M as well. So semi-total 173. I like the under. After Alabama, want to lay up to 8.5 with them. 7-13, 7-14. Louisiana is going to be on the road against James Madison, and our nation's 4th president is an 8 to an 8.5 point favor. 132.5 is the total. Set my line at 12.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Now, it's a good old situation of something's got to give because you have a Louisiana team that is not doing a good job in terms of taking care of the ball. In terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they are 258th in the country, and James Madison, a bottom 20 team in terms of generating turnovers. They do an okay job in terms of taking care of the ball themselves. They're about 204th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and they've been an okay team in terms of guarding the 3-point line. 33.8% is what opponents shoot from 3-point, and Louisiana has actually become a top 225 team with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, but where this team is really lacking is down low. This Louisiana team has not been able to find good looks from 2-point range all season long. Currently out of 365 Division I teams, they are checking in 330th in all of college basketball, and I do think that with having Eddie Ricks down low for the James Madison team, give you about 6+ rebounds per game, that they're going to be able to do a solid job there. Now, James Madison overall for the season has been about a top 140 team with regards to their opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, right around about 200th with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage on offense. But I have to like what Cliff Davis along with Bradley Douglas bring to the table in the backcourt, a combined 26.5 points per game. Davis shoots 37.5% from three. Justin McBride has been your top scorer, 16.5 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 44% from three. So really nice versatility there. And then additionally, you've been able to get 4 rebounds per game out of guys like Christian Brown. You've had 4 boards out of Preston Feller. So you've had a lot of mixing and matching in terms of being able to hit the boards. They're a team, James Madison is, that doesn't really grab a lot of second and third chances, but they're not giving up a ton of second and third chances as well. And for Louisiana, things just really went down the tubes for this offense with the Jamarian Keller injury. He was their top incoming transfer, comes over from Oklahoma State, and since then, Dorian Finster and Jackson Oliveira have had to run the show. They're combining for about 25.5 points per game, and Finster is out shooting about 38% from three, gives you about 4.5 rebounds per game, but I mean, he's the lone guy on the roster right now that gives you over 3.8 rebounds per game. Their star freshman and Justin Lewis just has not panned out. He's given the team 8 points per contest right now, deal with injury, and he's very doubtful for this game as well. So that's another guy that they're going to be down. And for Louisiana, because of all the injuries, they've had to just play at a super slow and controlled pace. 363rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. James Madison under Preston Spradlin, 246th in terms of total possessions per game, which honestly is a little bit faster than what we've seen them play in the past. But for this Louisiana team, they are going to give up a lot of good looks from three-point or outside the top three with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. James Madison being that solid three-point shooting team that they are in Louisiana, being outside the top 285 with regards to offensive rebound percentage. I do think that scoring chances are going to be at a premium. I think that James Madison is the lone team that really takes advantage of them. So I'm line at 12.5, so won't lay with James Madison, and I like the under. I set my total at a 130.5. 7:15, 7:16. Louisiana Monroe is going to be on the road against Old Dominion. Old Dominion is a 13.5 point favorite. Totals between 152.5 to 153, and I just had a total here of a 156.5. I like the over, mainly because you've got a Monroe team that is not afraid to push tempo. Right now, they are 57th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you've got an Old Dominion team that has been playing a little bit more up-tempo than what you'd expect. 103rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Now, for Old Dominion, after last year, they were a top 25 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. That is completely withered away. They are 310th of the country with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage outside the top 3 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they do a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball, in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're a top 110 team in the country, and in their home games specifically, they're a top 50 team with regards to their ball security, and they have been able to find some good three-point shooting this year. They're shooting overall about 34% for three, which strangely actually goes down to 31.1% at home. But Louisiana Monroe, they're actually an okay three-point shooting team. Right now, they clock in right around about 190th or so with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. They should have collective 33.8%, but man, they are outside the top 3 with regards to their own offensive rebound percentage, and this team is just ghastly with their defense. 339th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, outside the top 275 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. We'll say this for Louisiana Monroe, though. They've been able to have 2 guys really step up, give the team some good production, and Christian Lewis along with Batavius Russell, they combine for about 32.5 points per game. Russell shoots 35% for 3, and Lavelle Bruneau, when he's been out there, has shot 43% for 3. Problem is, he's been dealing with a little bit of injury, did return in that game against Coastal Carolina, had a double-double, so I'm thinking that he's going to be good to go in this game, but except for Old Dominion, you've had the likes of Casey Shaw and Robert Battle be able to step up in the backcourt as well, and they get to face off against a Monroe team that outside of Bruneau, nobody else gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game. So even though Caleb Sweaton Roger, the true 7-footer that comes over from Maryland, has taken steps back with only about 7.5 rebounds per game, they should still be rock solid there. Additionally, this has been a Old Dominion team that's been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, with Shaw and Battle being able to combine for about 31.5 points per game. And Battle shoots 42% from 3-5 boards per contest. Shaw throws in there a pair of assists. He gives you about 4.5 boards per contest as well. And neither team is really generating turnovers. This Old Dominion team outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Monroe as well outside the top 225 themselves. I think that you get a lot of good clean possessions. I think that Old Dominion is going to be able to rip it from 3-point range with Robert Davis starting to come on strong, 10 points per contest. He was their top scorer a season ago. Has had a little bit of issue and a little bit of injury this season, but he seems to be finding it once again. Then you've had LJ Thomas be able to throw in there about 11.3 assists per contest. So I do think that in this up and down game, you're going to be able to get some good, efficient offense. So I'm going to be in on this total over, and with Old Dominion, set them as a 14.5 point favorite. So I'm going to lay up to 14 with them. 7-17, 7-18 on the card. It is South Florida, and they're going to be playing us UT San Antonio. Meep the road runner, 25.5 to a 26.5 point underdog. It's not so great of meeps here. Total on Scape between 160.5 to 161.5. I said UTSA is a 24.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points, and it's been sad for this UT San Antonio team. I really don't know what they're doing right now. They're 363rd in the country with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage. They're 328th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they're 361st in the country. Honestly, they don't see much of a drop off when they're away from home rather than at home with regards to their offense, but you do have a South Florida team that has been outside the top 200 with regards to ball security. They've been allowing second and third chances on the glass, and one thing UTSA has done an okay job of, they're a top 115 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, so they corral some second and third chances. You've got Babacar Njai, who's been able to give you about 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Brent Moss has been able to throw in there about 5 rebounds per game, along with Caden Rayfield. Jameer Simpson has been really the leader for this team, 15.5 points, 4 boards, steal per contest, shoots 31% for 3, which sadly he and Dorian Hayes are the lone 2 guys on the roster that are shooting above 29% for 3-point range. That's really, really bad, to say the least. And South Florida, while they do give up some second and third chances on glass, they themselves have been a top 45 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. While they do give the ball away a little bit as well, they've been a top 75 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They actually lead the country in terms of free throw attempts per game, and they're also a top 2 team in terms of total possessions per game, so they're very much looking to gut. And UTSA, they're playing at a pretty brisk pace as well, 127th in the country in terms of total possessions per game for the South Florida team. You've got Isaiah Nelson averaging a double-double, 15.5 points, block and half, steal and half, 10 rebounds per game, and then Wes Inez, Joseph Pignon, they combine for 30 points per game between the two of them. They shoot 37.5% from 3, and then CJ Brown has been a do-it-all sort of guard with 12 points, 4 boards, 5 assists, steal per contest. Doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3, and South Florida only shoots about 33.5% from the outside. And UTSA, they're not the world's worst 3-point shooting defense. They're outside the top 250 with this regard, but I mean, it could be a little bit worse, but they're just getting absolutely lambasted in terms of giving up second and third chances. So do think that you get very much a game with a lot of scoring opportunities. Semi-total at a 162.5, so at the 161.5, I like the over, but I think the UTSA does just enough to be able to hold in there. I think that they get blasted, but I don't think they get blasted by 25. Plus, as I said, my number at 24.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with the Meet Me Roadrunners, and I'm going to be in on the total over as well. 719, 720, it's Florida International on the road against Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee is a favorite here of 6 to 7.5 points. 148.5 to 150 is the total, and I said a total of 151. I do like the over. You got a Florida International team that is very much looking to play up and down in terms of total possessions per game. This team checks in 23rd in all of college basketball with regards to total possessions per game. Middle Tennessee is going to be looking to play a little bit more low and slow. For Middle Tennessee, in terms of total possessions per game, they find themselves outside the top 240 in all of college basketball, so going to be an interesting dynamic here. And for Middle Tennessee, they've been able to do a really good job in terms of not allowing great looks from 3-point range. Teams are only shooting about 32.6% from 3 against them. That's a top 110 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, Florida International, they're giving it up from 3. In games played away from home, teams are shooting 39% from 3 against them. That is outside the top 300 in all of college basketball. But that said, this is a Florida International team that does a really good job in terms of putting you under duress and generating turnovers. In terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, 25th in all of college basketball. And they themselves have had their ball security issues, but it's a Middle Tennessee team that is not really going to be pressing the issue too much in terms of generating turnovers. They are checking in just 321st in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and I think that that's going to help with Florida National remaining lively in this game. I set my line at 5, so I'm going to be willing to take the points for Florida National. You've been able to have the former Meet Me Cal State Bakersfield Roadrunner be able to come in and do an amazing job in Corey Stevenson, 17.5 points, 6.5 boards, shoots 42% from 3. Julian Mackey is a 40% 3-point shooter who supplies about 13 points per game, and then you have a pair of guys in Eric Debami along with Larry Okanika who've been able to both give you about 6.5 rebounds per game between the two of them, darn near 19 points per contest as well. So I really like the way that they've been able to mix and match, Aaron. This is a team that on the inside has been a top 150 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now you do have a Middle Tennessee team that's able to shoot it quite well from 3. They're shooting 35% as a collective with Kamari Lands leading the way in terms of scoring, 13.5 points, shoots just below 36% from 3-point range. And then you've had Javon Carter be a nice facilitator, 3.5 assists, a steal, 11.5 points per game. And for Middle Tennessee, they've been able to do a nice job on the defensive glass. And for Florida National, this is a team that they give up a lot of second and third chances, but they themselves on the offensive boards, they do a solid job in terms of being able to give themselves some second and third chances as well. Florida National, a top 120 team in terms terms of offensive rebound percentage, but boy, oh boy, do they give up those second and third chances, and they might not have quite as many of them against a Middle Tennessee team that, with regards to their defensive rebound percentage, they're a top 120 team in all of college basketball for international. Right now, they're allowing teams to grab 34.1% of their wrist shots as an offensive rebound, but for Middle Tennessee, only have two guys on the roster that give you four rebounds per game. Tori Ellison, 12.5 points, 8 rebounds out of block per contest. Chris Lufay, about 1.3 blocks, 6.5 points, 6 boards per game. I think that this is going to be a slow down game, and if Middle Tennessee needs to cover at the free throw line, they do shoot just 67.3% the free throw line for a national outside the top 250 as well with regards to free throw shooting percentage, but with them being the underdog, that's a little bit more advantageous. So I did set my line at 151. I'd like the over, and anything above 5 will take those points with Florida International. 721, 722 on the card. It is Creighton, and they're going to be on the road against Georgetown. Georgetown is a 1.5 to a 2.5 point favorite total on this game between 145.5 to 147.5. It's at a total of a 146.5. I was seeing a lot of earlier like 145.5, and I personally would rather have a 145.5 to the over rather than a 147.5 to the under, mainly because it is a Georgetown team I think is going to start to find it a little bit more from three-point range, and I know that we've talked with our good friend Mid-Major Matt, who joined the podcast yesterday. He's been taking a look at a lot of these first half overs with regards to Creighton, who just doesn't put you under duress. You're going to get a lot of clean possessions in this game. Georgetown's the top 35 team in terms of few turnovers on a per possession basis. Creighton outside the top 320 in terms of generating turnovers, and Georgetown gives up a lot of second and third chances at home. At home, they allow opponents to grab 30.1% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is outside the top 230 in all of college basketball. And Creighton, they allow opponents to grab about 30% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That ranks 247th in the country. And with Georgetown, you have back Vincent Iwuchukwu, a true 7-footer who's been able to give this team some really nice versatility as he supplies 10.5 points, 5 boards. He actually gives you a steal and a block per contest as well, and it's a very small sample size, but he's shooting 42% from 3-point just for a Georgetown team that is now shooting about 32.9% from 3. That's been able to get into the top 250 in all of college basketball. Still rather fragile on the inside, outside the top 240 with their 2-point shooting percentage, but they've been a top 65 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. Malik Mack, KJ Lewis, these two guys are combining for just under 29 points per contest, and Lewis has been able to shoot 34% from 3, a pair of steals, about 5 rebounds per game. With Creighton, I do think that they've just got a little bit more star power up and down the boulevard. That's a big reason why I did set them here as a 2.5 point favorite. So with Creighton, I'm going to be willing to take them on the money line, especially with this Creighton team in a pressure spot shooting over 75% of the free throw line. That's a top 80 mark in the country, as right now you've had Austin Schwartz in conference play really start to light it up. 16 points per game in conference play with shooting 41% from 3 overall for the season, shoots 39% from the outside. And then Josh Dix, Nick Graves, along with Jason Green, all give between 10 and 11.8 points per game. Owen Freeman has been a big giant disappointment for this team, and he's dealt with a little bit of injury, but Isaac Trout is able to give you about 7 points. He's been able to give you some nice 3-point shooting, and while this Creighton team does not do a great job on the glass, they don't generate a lot of turnovers. They're a top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball themselves, and for this Creighton team, they will not put you on the free throw line. They're a top 10 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis. It's a Creighton bunch that is a top 50 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, and I do think that they do just enough on the inside to be able to get a ton, and should be a rather controlled game. It's a Creighton team that's about 241st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Georgetown is very much a mid-tempo team right now in terms of total possessions per game. You're going to be finding them more around about 256th, but I think that the overall efficiency is just enough there for the over. So semi total 146.5, like the over. I'm with Creighton. I'm willing to take them on the money line as an underdog. 723, 724. It's UTEP. They're going to be on the road against Sam Houston State, and Sam Houston State is a favorite here of 10.5 to 11.5 points. 144.5 is the total, and I made a total of a 147. I like the over. Now, with UTEP, they're not looking to push tempo. 339th in terms of total possessions per game. Sam Houston is 73rd in terms of total possessions per game. And typically, this UTEP team is amazing at generating turnovers. And they're still not bad, but they're 68th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. That's way down from a season ago. And in games played away from home, they fall well outside the top 100 with that regard. This has been a Sam Houston team that has had a little bit of ball control issues all season long. Sam Houston, they do check in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on the offensive side of things, right around about 177th, but most of them go away at home, and it's a UTEP team that has actually been able to find a little bit of 3-point shooting here recently. Elijah Jones and Paul West, they combine for 28 points per game. With Jones, he shoots 37.5% for 3. West is shooting 33% for 3, and UTEP has become a top 225 team with their 3-point shooting percentage. They just give you nothing on the inside. They're outside the top 300 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 260 with regards to their overall rebound percentage, as right now West, who's giving you 7 rebounds per game, he's the lone guy on the roster. That gives you over 5 rebounds per game, and he also does give you a block per contest, so a little bit of a shout out there. And for Sam Houston, this is a whole is greater than some of its parts approach team that likes to play fast, but they just have everyone working in tandem. They've been dealing with a little bit of an injury to the TCU transfer in Isaiah Manning, but even if he's not able to play in this game, that still gives you 7 different players that give you between 7.9 and 13.3 points per contest, with Po Boy King, great name, coming over from NC Central, leading the way, 13.5 points, shoots 36.5% for 3, because she not has been able to supply 11 points, 2.2 steals, 2.2 assists, while shooting 47% from 3-point. It's the Sam Houston State team that they do shoot as a collective about 36% from 3-point, as a top 75 mark in the country, and it's a UTEP team that is outside the top 225 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. And additionally, for the Sam Houston State team, they've been a top 100 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they grab a lot of second and third chances. Top 30 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, with UTEP not necessarily being great on the glass. I do think that is going to be very paramount in this spot, and with this UTEP team, they are not afraid to put you on the free throw line. They're a bottom 15 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. That should allow Sam Houston to be able to run and hide with this game. I did somehow line at 11. I'm going to be looking here between a 10.5 to an 11.5 to lay it here with Sam Houston State. I'd rather lay 10.5 rather than take 11.5, so want to lay the number, and I'm in on the over at 725, 726. Charlotte is on the road against Wichita State. Wichita State an 8.5 to a 9-point favorite with a total of 141.5, and I made Wichita State the favorite here of 10 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay that number. It's a Charlotte team that does a really nice job in terms of slowing down games, serves total possessions ranked 342nd in all of college basketball. With Wichita State, they're becoming a more up-tempo team, 226th in the country in terms of total possessions brain, but where Wichita State is absolutely going to be able to dominate this game is on the boards. They're pretty solid with regards to their defensive rebound percentage at 72nd. Meanwhile, Charlotte, they're allowing teams to grab about 29.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, and that gets into the more dominant part of this Wichita State team down low, as Wichita State, in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, they are 6th in the country. They grab 38.4% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, with the Will Berg, coming on over from Purdue, being that main guy. He stands right around about 7'1", 7'2", about 8.8 points, 8.2 rebounds per game, and then Keenan Giles shoots 41% from 3. He's supplying you with 18 points per game. Wichita State overall a top 75 team with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, as they're shooting 36.5% from 3, and they take great care of the ball. They're a top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Charlotte has had some turnover issues at about 242nd in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, Wichita State, they're not going to generate a lot of turnovers, so that helps out Charlotte. And Charlotte themselves has been a good 3-point shooting team. They shoot 36.8% as a collective. That does go down to about 34.2% away from home, while Wichita State, they're shooting about 35.5% from 3. That goes up to about 36.5% at home, with Karen Boyd shooting 35% from 3, 11 points per contest. Mike Gray has been able to shoot about 37% from the outside. He chips in there about 9 or so points per contest as well. And then for Charlotte, you do have a guy, Anton Boinke, comes over as a 7'2" big man for Providence. He's got great versatility, 11 points, 8.5 boards, about a block and a half per contest, while shooting 35% from 3. Ben Bradford doesn't shoot it well from 3, but gives you 13.5 points, steal per contest. The same Mingo has been able to flow this offense very cleanly, 4.5 assists, 11.5 points per game, but it's also a Charlotte team that's outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, about country average 200th with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And with Charlotte, they have been a top 100 team themselves in terms of grabbing second and third chances, so I do think they're going to get a lot of second and third chance opportunities. I just don't know if Charlotte is going to be able to do their part with this total. I don't think that you get enough possessions for the over in this game as well, so I just set a total of 138. I'm in on the under, and with Wichita State, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9.5 with them. 727, 728. You've got New Mexico State on the road against Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech does find themselves as a 1.5 point favorite total last game. It is 138 to 138.5, and I like the under. I set my total at a 128.5. I just don't know where the points are coming from. You've got two low-tempo teams with this New Mexico State punch in terms of total possessions per game. They find themselves at 281st in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, it's even slower for Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech is in the bottom 10 in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and the one thing that Louisiana Tech has been able to do on offense is grab second and third chances. They are 49th in the country in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and they need to grab every one of them that they can because their shooting is just not good. 360th in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. Not to say say that New Mexico State is among the least Vitos of three-point shooting. They're 33.7%. That's country average. That's 195th in the country, but a big, giant advantage here. And this is a New Mexico State team that is not quite the same defensive team that they were a season ago. Last year, they were actually one of your better mid-major defenses in all of college basketball. This year, they are down to a ranking right around about 182nd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But the one thing I can say for this defense is that it has actually traveled really well in games played away from home. They ascend back into the top 110 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Louisiana Tech, this is very much a team that's going to be looking to pile drive the ball down low because they've got absolutely no three-point shooting whatsoever. But New Mexico State is really not going to be allowing for a lot of that, as this is a New Mexico State team that ranks 51st in the country in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage away from home. Louisiana Tech, 26th in terms of percentage of their field goal attempts at home that come from two-point range. And for New Mexico State, they've got the best scorer in this game, and Jamel Jones comes over from the Meet Cal State Bakersfield Roadrunners, leads the way with about 15.5 points per game. He's been able to also throw in there about 4 boards, pair of assists, shoots 36% from 3, and Elijah Elliott has been a nice ancillary guard as well. About 10 points, 2.5 assists. He's been able to shoot 37.5% from 3. Julius Mims is really your main guy down low, and as a matter of fact, the only guy in the roster that gives you over 4.2 rebounds per game, 8.5 boards, 10.5 points. He's got good versatility as well, shooting 37.5 or so percent from 3-point range. And even though they don't necessarily have that ancillary big man to go alongside of him, they have been good on the glass, being a top 100 team in terms of both offensive and defensive rebound percentage as well. And then on the flip side for Louisiana Tech, this has been a team that has been very good down low. And you do have DJ Turn It Up Dudley along with AJ Bates, who have actually been very good in the backcourt. These two guys are combining for just a hair below 28 points per game. With Dudley, he's done a nice job in terms of being able to give you about 42% three-point shooting. And then you've had Bates be able to throw in their 5.5 assists per game. But it's a Louisiana Tech team that's had a tough time taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 200 with regards to their ball security, and they're not executing on the inside either. They're outside the top 260 in terms of their own two-point shooting percentage. If this is a pressure spot, they shoot in their games involving non-D1 teams 64.8% of the free throw line, against D1 teams only 65.1%. That's a bottom 10 mark in the country, and they can't be trusted on this sideline, in my opinion. So I said New Mexico State as a 2.5 point favorite. I do like them here on the money line, and I made my total a 128.5, so I'm going to be taking a shot on the under as well. 729, 730, it's Baylor. They're going to be playing us to Colorado. Colorado does find themselves as an underdog of 6.5 to 7.5 points. So on this game between 158.5 to 159.5. Made my line 4. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Colorado. It's a Colorado team that has shot it quite well from 3-point range right now. Overall for the season, they're about 58th in the country. They shoot 36.3% for 3. Goes down a little bit away from home, but it's been a Baylor defense that just has not been getting the job done all season long. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, Baylor is checking in 178th in the country, and in games played at home, that falls outside the top 190. No, it's not like Colorado's been the most amazing defense themselves at 250th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So I'm going to be in on the over. I set my total 162, especially with Colorado playing at a relatively brisk pace, 117th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Baylor has actually been very much slowed down here in conference play, but they're still 118th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And Baylor still does a great job in terms of grabbing second and third chances. A top 15 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, with Cameron Carr driving things with 19.5 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 40% from 3. But they just have had James Nanji be unplayable. How is this guy ever the 31st pick in the draft? He is averaging 1.3 points per game, and for James Nanji in his last 5 games that he has played, and he has scored as many points as me. Like, how is that possible? Like, this guy's been absolutely terrible out there. So that's not been great, and that means that they have no depth whatsoever. Now, Isaac Williams has been pretty much your lone guy that's come off the bench giving you production. 9.5 points. He's actually shooting 51% from 3. Obi Edgem, he shoots 39% from 3. This is a Colorado team that is going to give it up from 3-point range, but you've got a Baylor team that they themselves are going to give it up from 3-point range as well. So lots of made threes in this game. Colorado, in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, by the way, nice hearty 322nd in all of college basketball. It actually goes down to 35.6% away from home compared to 37.6% at home. But Baylor, they allow opponents to shoot 34% from 3-point range at home. That's outside the top 225 in the country, though they do have Tonde Yusufu, who right now give you about 17.3 points per contest. And then on the flip side for Colorado, you saw Barrington Argris shooting over 51% for 3, 13.5 points per contest. Isaiah Johnson has been able to give you about 16.5 points per game. And for this Baylor team, their forte has been really grabbing those second and third chances. But Colorado, not the world's worst team down low. They have been a squad that has been right around about 200th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're a top 175 team with regards to overall rebound percentage. And Colorado does a nice job in terms of maximizing their possession possessions, top 35 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They shoot 76.3% of the free throw line. That's the top 55 mark. And then you've got Bengo Doc, who's been able to give you 11 points, 7 boards. Sebastian Rencic has been able to throw in there 5.5 boards, 13 points, and Rencic shoots about 35% from 3. So really good versatility. I do think that for Baylor, they should be able to get the job done here. I feel like perhaps they turned a little bit of a quarter against West Virginia, but not a lot of depth with this being a pair of teams that they don't guard the three-point line well. I do think they get a lot of scoring in this game. So I set a total of 162. I'm in on the over and the points with Colorado, 731, 732 on the card. It is UMKC, Kansas City, playing us to South Dakota. South Dakota, a 2 to 2.5 point road favor. 156.5 is the total. I set a total of a 162. I'm in on the over. You've got a Kansas City team that for some reason has really sped up their tempo this year. They are 90th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, South Dakota, as per usual, they're playing at warp speed. They're 24th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And South Dakota, away from home, is shooting 38% from three-point range. That is a top 35 mark in all of college basketball. And this is a Kansas City team that typically they pride themselves on rebounding, good, solid defense. Kansas City is 345th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. South Dakota is 320th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And away from home, that goes into the bottom 20. So both of these teams are just wretched with regards to their defense. Now, Kansas City outside the top 300 in terms of ball security, but they go up against the South Dakota team that is outside the top 175 in terms of generating turnovers. And this South Dakota team is really giving it up down low. They're in the bottom 10 in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but hey, they're a top 50 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. The Bruns burner, Isaac Bruns, has been able to give you 21 points, shoots 39% for 3. Jordan Crawford has been able to shoot 37.5% for 3, 14 points per contest. Cameron Fens, true 7-footer, block and a half, 13 points, 8 rebounds per game. And I do think that in the end gets it done for South Dakota. I did set them as a 4-point favorite, and they do shoot 74.5% the free throw line. If it does come down to that, that's a top 120 mark in all of college basketball. And for Kansas City, they've ascended a little bit with their 3-point shooting, but man, it's still relatively rough for them. And for Kansas City, with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, they are 299th in all of college basketball as well. Well, they themselves have not necessarily been a great 3-point shooting team. Kansas City, 354th in the country, and that actually goes down to 27.5% from 3-point shot home. They've been a little bit better here in conference play. In conference play only, they shoot about 30.7% from the outside, but that's not saying a whole heck of a lot. You've been able to get a bit out of Carmelo Branch, who's been able to give you 12.5 points, shoots 35.5% for 3. Kasheem Grady, 35% 3-point shooter, 10.5 points per contest. Lone 2 guys on the roster that shoot about 32% from 3, but with South Dakota, they're very weak down low, and it has been a UMKC team that's been a little bit better with their interior play. They've been able to become a top 225 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but again, those turnovers have just completely torpedoed any hope for them, and they're also a team that is well outside the top 300 with their own 2-point shooting percentage, as well as Uriah Evans has been able to give you 12.5 points per contest. It's a UMKC team that really doesn't put you on the free throw line a ton, but they themselves shoot 70% at the free throw line. South Dakota is so ghastly on defense. I do think that UMKC actually does their part with the total, so I'm in on the over, but with South Dakota willing to lay up to 3.5 points with them, made them the 4-point favorite. 733, 734. Georgia Tech is on the road against Cal, and California finds themselves as a nice 8.5 point home favorite. Total on this game, 150.5 to 153, and with Cal, I did set them as a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Georgia Tech has been overall a relatively respectable defense, 66th in the country. There's points allowed on a per possession basis, but they give up 15.3 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And for Georgia Tech, this is actually a really good 3-point shooting team. They shoot 37.6% from 3-point range away from home. That is a top 35 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, it's a Cal team that's actually shot a little bit better from 3-point range when they've been away from home rather than at home. 36.1% at home, 39.4% in a roadside church court venue. But I think that things are going to be at a little bit more of a premium here. Now for Cal, this has been a team that's been well outside the top 125 with regards to their overall rebound percentage, but it is a California team that they've been able to do a great job of guarding the outside. They allow teams to shoot 29.1% for 3. That is 11th in the country. At Georgia Tech, they allow teams to shoot only 30.3% for 3. That is a top 40 mark as well. So these two teams' strengths on offense are going to be a little bit more mitigated, but I'm going to be willing to lay with Cal because, for one, you've got a Georgia Tech team that has to go through all sorts of travel, and two, this Georgia Tech team outside the top 300 in terms of ball security, 13.5 turnovers per game, and they're outside the top 290 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage, despite the fact that they've got Peyton Nogo give you 12.5 points, 8 rebounds per game. Mohamed Siala has been able to give you 9.5 points, right around about 7.2 rebounds per game, but Siala is right now dealing with a little bit of an injury. We haven't seen him in about a week and a half, and I don't think that he's going to be going here, so that puts the onus on Lamar Washington to be able to step up, who's been very versatile for the squad. 11.5 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, shoots 32.5% from 3, and Kwasi Reeves is a main three-point shooter, shoots 39% from three, about 16 points per game, and Georgia Tech, for some reason, has played really fast this year. If you look at them in terms of total possessions per game, they check in 47th in the country. Cal is a very mid-tempo team right now in terms of total possessions per game, 181st in the country, and for Cal, I do think that they're going to do a nice job locking down with regards to the backcourt, mainly because you don't have Ciala to be able to guard down low, and then you've been able to have Day-Day Ames be able to supply 16.5 points. He shoots 40% from three. John Camden at 6'8", 14.5 points. He shoots 42% from three-point range, and it is a unit that has been able to do a very solid job as well in terms of being able to knock down their free throws in a pressure spot. They shoot 78.5% at the free throw line. That is the top 15 mark in the country. Chris Bell shoots 89% at the free throw line, 12.5 points per game. And matter of fact, you've got each of your top four scorers all being able to shoot at least 81% at the free throw line. Now you only have one player on the roster, that'd be Lee Dort. That gives you over 4.8 rebounds per game, 7.5 boards, 8.5 points per game. But I do think that Cal, with the way that they take care of the ball, top 35 team, turns a few turnovers on a per possession basis, get it done in a game where the three-point shooting for both of these teams, I think, is not going to be there the way that it typically is. So I set my line at a 9.5. I'm willing to lay with Cal, and I'm in on the under. Semi total 145.5, 735, 736. Detroit is on the road against UW Milwaukee, and Milwaukee's a favorite of anywhere between 4.5 to 6.5 points. Total on this game, you're getting it between 158.5 to 159.5. And I did set a total of a 154.5. I like the under, even though Detroit has really been able to get things cranked up with regards to their offense, and it's a Detroit team that's looking to play quite up tempo. They're 92nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and you've got a Milwaukee team that has been very much a mid-tempo team this season. They're about 158th in terms of total possessions per game, but for Milwaukee, the injuries have just piled up. You are down your top scorer along with your top two rebounders, as Daniil Janovic has not been seen in about 3 weeks. Fazion Fields, we haven't seen him in about a month, and the season is done for Seth Hubbard, so that means that Amar Uyagard, who's been able to give you about 13.5 points per contest, he's not your main guy. He shoots about 32.5% per three. Milwaukee just doesn't have a lot of three-point shooting. They're outside the top 270 with regards to their own three-point shooting percentage. Now, what has been the forte of this Milwaukee team is grabbing second and third chances. They're a top 75 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and that's also the strength for the Detroit team. They're hovering right around about 50th in the country in terms of their own offensive rebound percentage as well, but now being without Fields along Jovanovic, that really hurts them, and for this UW Milwaukee team, they give up quite a few second and third chances on the glass as well. They're outside the top 160 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Now Milwaukee doing a good job taking care of the ball, top 75 team, turns a few turnovers on a per possession basis, but again, lots of, shall we say, transition in the backcourt. Stevie Elam, he's been dealing with a little bit of injury, but he's come back and he's been able to be a nice producer, double figures in now 4 out of the last 5 games. Shoots 35% from three, so they're going to be looking very heavily to him. And for Detroit, they have found a guy that's really able to light it up from three. That'd be TJ Nidu. He's been very neat with his 13 points per game, shoots 45% from three. And for a Detroit team that all of a sudden has been able to ascend into the top 200 with their three-point shooting percentage here in conference play, they're actually shooting 40+% from three-point range. That is tops in the conference, and you've been able to get quite a bit of production out of Orlando Lovejoy. Doesn't really light it up from three, but 13.5 points, 3.5 assists per game, and they should be able to take it to a UW Milwaukee team that's just absolutely giving it up from three-point. Just the UW Milwaukee team. It's outside the top 3 area with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage, also outside the top 3 area in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. I just don't know if Milwaukee's going to be able to do their part with this total, because they're one of the worst teams in the country in terms of their free throw shooting percentage at 68.2%. This is a Detroit team that is very much not afraid to put you on the free throw line. As a matter of fact, they're a bottom 30 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis, and for Milwaukee, they've had to really slow things down with all the injuries to them. Meanwhile, you've got a guy in Tyler Spratt who's been able to give you about 10 points, shoots 40% for three for Detroit. So I think that Detroit, who shoots actually 75% free throw line, top 85 mark in the country, they do a nice job holding in there. I set my total 154.5. I like the under and the points with Detroit. 737, 738. It's North Texas. They're going to be on the road against Rice. We give our to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. That's the Rice Owls. Sorry, 2 to a 2.5 point underdog. Total on this game 133.5 to 134.5. Set my line at 2. So 2.5 does become my buy point on Rice. I do like the under as well. I set my total at 128. And the big reason why I really can't lay it here with North Texas, in their road/court games this year, they have broken 67 points once. They are outside the top 340 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis away from home. But if you take a look at the defense away from home, they've been one of the most dominant defenses in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis in a road/court venue. They're a top 25 team in the country. They're a top 10 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis in a road/court venue, and for Rice, just 246th in the country in terms of points per possession. So I think you're in for an almighty slog, especially with North Texas being outside the top 295 in terms of total possessions per game. North Texas, they only shoot 31.5% from three. They're outside the top 290 with that regard, hovering right around 300th with their 2-point shooting percentage as David Terrell, Jashawn Stevenson, they've had to headline the offense. Stevenson is able to give you about 17 points per steals per contest. Terrell, 13 points, 1.5 steals, and he does chip in there about 5 assists per game, but out of their top 7 scorers that are currently healthy, Stevenson is the only one that shoots above 27% from three-point shooting. You have had Kamau Crosby be able to shoot about 38% from three, but 2.9 points per game. That's just not enough to be able to make too much of an impact. And on the flip side for Rice, you do have quite a few returning guards I think are going to be able to keep them lively, as you've been able to have Jalen Smith, who actually followed his coach Rob Lanier on over from SMU, give you about 12 points, shoots 40% from three. Nick Anderson, 41.5% three-point shooter, 15 points steal per contest. Trey Bordeaux, 15.5 points. He throws in there a steal, 33% three-point shooting for a Rice team that's had a tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 225 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. They have actually shot 36.5% from three. That's a top 75 mark in the country, but North Texas, top 25 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and for Rice, they're outside the top 325 with regards to their two-point shooting percentage. I think that you get an almighty slug, but the lack of offense from North Texas just causes me to not be able to lay it with them. We'll take 2.5 plus here with Rice, and I'm in on the underside by total at a 128. 739, 740, you've got BYU, and they're going to be on the road against Oklahoma State, and the Cowboys find themselves as a underdog here of 6.5 points, 169.5 to 170.5 is the total. I do like the under, as I said, my total at a 167.5. You've got a BYU team that is one of the most balanced teams in all of college basketball. Recognize that in their game against Kansas, the defense was not necessarily so great, but still, if you look overall for the season, they do rank 41st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. If you look at their overall offensive efficiency, they're checking in more in that neighborhood about 22nd in the country, and they've been able to travel relatively well overall for the season. And it's an Oklahoma State team that they do get a little bit careless with the ball. They're outside the top 150 in terms of ball security, though. They've been able to get really good production out of Anthony Roy, 17.5 points. He shoots 44% for three, 87.5% at the free throw, and that's really helped this team be able to elevate, as it's an Oklahoma State team that they're solid with their three-point shooting at 35%, but they're a top 100 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from the inside. It is an Oklahoma State team that's left a little bit something to be desired on defense. They're outside the top 180 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, and with those turnover issues, I do think that BYU does go on the road, get the job done. I did set my total at a 7.5, even though you do have for Oklahoma State a pair of guys in Victorious Miller along with Pasa Farah, who are combining for 27 points per game, and Fala has been able to give you about 6.3 rebounds per game. He is a lone guy on the roster, though, that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. And I recognize that BYU isn't like a top 10 team with regards to rebound percentage or anything like that, but Kevin Kita should be able to win that battle down low. He gives his team about 7 points, 8 rebounds per game. AJ Devansa, he's been incredible at 23.5 points, 6.5 boards, 3.5 assists. Shoots only about 33% from three, but that's why you've got Robert Wright, Richie Saunders combined to shoot about 41% from three. Between the two of them, you are getting 37 points per game. And then you've been able to have Kennar Davis do a nice job coming in and being able to give you some nice contributions with about 7 points, a steal, a little bit more of a defensive stopper for this team, as BYU, they are a top 75 unit with regards to their overall rebound percentage, and they've been strong down low. BYU, top 50 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage on offense, and on defense in the top 75. They're as well a team that does not give many looks at the free throw line whatsoever. Top 40 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. They do the little things well. They're a top 75 team in terms of taking care of the ball. Not really going to put you under too much stress, but I do think that BYU goes on the road, gets the job done, and they play just enough defense to be able to keep it under against an Oklahoma State team that is absolutely looking to gun it. BYU is fast. They're 71st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but this Oklahoma State team, they take it to another level at number 8, but I do think that BYU holds up here, so I did set my line at 7.5, one to life to 7 with BYU, and like the under, set my total 167.5, 741, 742. Northwestern is going to be on the road against Illinois, and the Fighting Illini are a massive favorite here, as you're going to be laying 15 to 15.5 points, 151 to 151.5 is the total, and I set my total at a 115.5. I like the under now. For Illinois, they actually lead the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they're really not playing with a lot of tempo right now. In terms of total possessions per game, they actually now check in at 307th in the country. Northwestern is never really a fast team, 288th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Northwestern, they've been a solid offense, 77th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but the one thing that I think is going to be able to keep them lively in this game, and the reason why I was willing to take the points, they're a really good three-point shooting defense. They're allowing teams away from home to shoot 29.1% from 3 points. That's actually a top 20 mark in all of college basketball, and for Illinois, they're certainly going to be able to win the battle down low. But Northwestern on their side has Nick Martinelli, who's just so versatile. He's able to supply 23.5 points, 6.5 boards. He's shooting 47.5% from three-point range. Now, outside of him, you've only got two other guys on the roster that give you over 3.7 rebounds per 8 trees. Singleton, about 8 points, 5 boards, and then Arrington Page, 11.5 points, pair of assists, a block, 5 rebounds per game. And outside of Martinelli, nobody else among your top 6 scorers shoot above 33% from three-point range. So Illinois is going to do a great job there. And Northwestern, their main forte has been protecting the ball, being a team that ranks in the top 10 in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. But Illinois doesn't generate turnovers to start with. Illinois is actually a bottom 3 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they also don't allow free throw attempts. They're number 1 in the country in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis, and Illinois is going to be looking to go bombs away from 3. They take nearly 50% of their shots from 3, top 15 mark in the country, so I do think that that'll keep Northwestern in this game, even with Keaton Wagler being incredible. 18 points, 5 boards, 4 assists. He's now shooting 44% from 3. W. Marosic has been able to give you 12.5 points, 8 boards, 2.5 assists. He shoots 36% from 3, and then the Ivisic brothers have combined for 17.5 points, 10.5 rebounds per game. Tomislav has not been what he was a season ago, but still doing a good job in terms of being able to contribute. You're still dealing with the Kylan Boswell injury, so that certainly hurts this Illinois team. But for Illinois, even though they don't really put you under duress, they do a great job being a top 10 team with regards to rebound percentage. They've been a top 45 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, along with their own 2-point shooting percentage. So I do think that Illinois is going to be able to get it done, but I do think that the way that Northwestern is able to guard the arc is going to do just enough for them to remain lively and do just enough to be able to keep this total under, especially in a lower possession game. So semi-total at a 150.5. I'm in on the under, and with Northwestern, I'm going to take 15 plus with them. 743, 744. It's Arizona State. They're going to be on the road against Utah, and Utah does find themselves as a 1 to 1.5 point favorite. 159.5 to 161 is the total, and for Utah, I did set them as the favorite here of 2.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to a deuce with them. For Utah, it certainly has been a less than savory defense, but it's not like Arizona State is doing a whole heck of a lot on defense as well, as right now Arizona State 255th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and away from home, that dips down to right around about 300th in the country. Meanwhile, for Utah, if you look at them in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are 305th, so yeah, both of these teams are not amazing to say the least, and Arizona State has some of the most funky home and road splits that you're going to find in terms of offensive efficiency in all of college basketball. Arizona State overall is ranking about 136th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but if you look at them in a road/score venue, they actually ascended to the top 35 in the country. They're outside the top 225 at home, as Arizona State shoots 39% from 3-point range away from home, 30.7 at home. I do have to think that that starts to iron out a little bit, and then you got a Utah team that has been not necessarily a team that's been incredible with regards to their low post play, but they've been a good 3-point shooting team. They shoot 36.6% from 3, 35.1% at home, 39% away from home. Again, I think that irons out a little bit, and for Arizona State, right now you've only got 2 guys on the roster that really give you over 4 rebounds per game. Santiago Triad has supplied about 7.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Masamba Diop, 13.5 points, 5 boards, about 2 blocks per contest, with Mo Odom being Mr. Versatile, 17 points, 6 assists, 2.5, shoots 36.5% from 3, but Arizona State is a team that's just going to give up a lot from the outside. They're outside the top 280 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They're a country average team with their own 2-point shooting percentage as well, and for Arizona State, they do find themselves outside the top 230 with regards to rebound percentage, so Utah, they should be able to have a little bit of an edge down low with having Keno Dawes be able to supply about 12.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game, and even though James Okonkwo only gives you 2.5 points per game, his 5.4 rebounds per game is big, and then Terrence Brown has really been able to find a deer in conference play. In conference play, he's shooting 53% from 3 with 23 points per contest. Overall for the season, 22 points per contest. He's a takeover guy, and then Don McHenry is able to give you about 18 points per game. In a pressure spot, Utah, they shoot about 73.5% of the free throw line. That's either here nor there, and they themselves are outside the top 270 with their own 3-point shooting percentage defense. So I think that you're going to be able to get a nice expose of scoring, and with Utah, they're not going to put you under duress. They're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Arizona State's been in the top 150, but I think that Utah, a top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball, going to be able to do just enough here, and I do think that they have an edge on the glass to be able to get it done. I set Utah as the 2.5 point favorite, 1 to lay up to 2 with them, and like the over, semi-total 164.5, 745, 746. It's Kentucky. They're going to be playing us at Oklahoma, and Boomer Sooner is a 9.5 to a 10-point dog. Throw this game between 152.5 to 154, and for Kentucky, I did set them as an 8.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take 9 plus with Oklahoma. It's an Oklahoma offense that has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of firing all cylinders. I recognize that things have been less than savory for them this year, and it's an Oklahoma team that is relatively mid-tempo, 146th in the country in terms of total possessions possessions per game. Kentucky has really sold themselves out from past years as well, 187th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And with Kentucky, they've done a solid job in terms of not allowing second and third chances at home. Opponents grab about 23.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is a top 75 mark in the country. And despite Kentucky having a bit of a disjointed backcourt, they're still about 48th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got an Oklahoma group that is 39th, albeit they have been averaging about 16.8 points per 100 possessions when they've been away from home rather than at home. But I think that the backcourt of Nigel Pack along with Xavier Brown is going to be able to keep them alive in this game. Both of these guys give you 16.2 points per game. Pack has packed it in at 43% three-point shooting. Both guys give between 3.1 and 3.2 assists per game. And Oklahoma just does a great job taking care of the ball. Top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, on defense, they've been well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, as this is a group that is outside the top 175 in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, despite the fact that Mohamed Wagyu has been able to give you about 6.5 points, 6.5 boards per contest, and Tay Davis throws in there about 6 rebounds per game, and that is going to be the big edge for this Kentucky team, as you've had Malachi Moreno as a 7-footer step up, give this team about 6.5 boards, 8.5 points per game. Mohamed Diabate was missing for a little bit of time, but he's back, gives you about 8.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and for the backcourt, it's all about Denzel Aberdeen and Ortega Owe. These two guys combined for a little bit over 29 points per game, and Aberdeen shoots 38.5% from three. For Kentucky, it's been a bit of an adventure with their three-point shooting. They shoot about 34% overall for the season, which in SEC play has actually gone up to about 35% from three-point, and they do a good job in terms of guarding the three-point line. Kentucky has been a top 60 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but I just don't trust in this Kentucky team quite enough for them to be able to cover this sort of a number. It is a Kentucky team that is not afraid to put you on the free throw line, and with Oklahoma being as efficient as they are on offense, I do think that they're going to do just enough to hold in this game. I do think that they do their part with regards to this over as well. So I set my total at a 156.5. I do like the over, and we'll take 9+ here with Oklahoma. 747, 748, it's Pepperdine, and they're going to be on the road against Seattle. Seattle finds themselves as a good-sized favorite here of between 11.5 to 12.5 points. Total scheme between 136.5 to 137.5, and I made Seattle the favorite of 11 points. So I'm going to be willing to take 11.5 plus. This is going to be a pretty slow and controlled game. Seattle has honestly become a bit more of a mid-tempo team, about 166th in terms of total possessions per game. Pepperdine is about 201st, but neither of these teams are doing necessarily an amazing job of taking care of the ball, and Seattle is doing a good job in terms of generating turnovers. In terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, this Seattle defense is right now number 9 in all of college basketball, and that's bad because Pepperdine is well outside the top 3 in terms of their own ball security, but it's not like Seattle's doing a great job maximizing possessions as well. At home, they're outside the top 230 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and it's a Seattle group that started out hot from three-point range to begin the season, but they have cooled off to being outside the top 150 now, and they don't execute inside. They're about 250th with their two-point shooting percentage. Pepperdine overall is 270th, but if you put Pepperdine in a road/neutral court venue, they've actually become a top 135 team in terms of executing inside. I think that that's enough for them to be able to remain lively, as you've got a guy that I like in Danilo Dozic, who has size at 6'10", 11.5 points, only gives you 3 rebounds per game, but Kyle Phipps, he's a versatile piece with about 5 boards, 5 assists, 13.5 points per game. He shoots only about 22% from 3, and Pepperdine, they shoot 29% from 3-point range. That is a bottom 15 mark in all of college basketball, but they also have been a country average team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. For Pepperdine, they do find themselves a bit outside the top 200 with regards to rebound percentage, so that's been a little bit of an issue, but Aaron Clark has been able to give you about a steal and a half, 13 points per game, as Pepperdine has been a top 250 team themselves in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And for Seattle, you do have a guy that I like in Huron Don down low. Well, he gives you about 5.5 points per game, but he's a relatively solid low post piece that's able to give you some shot blocking. And then Will Hembroth has been able to lead the way with 2.5 blocks, 12 points, and he shoots only 30% from 3, but does a great job being able to pull in their 5 boards per contest. Brady Maldonado is really the head of this offense, 15 points per game, shoots 37.5% from 3, but he is right now the lone out of your top 5 scorers that shoots above 30.4% from 3 in a pressure spot. Seattle, they shoot 70.1% in the free throw line. That's outside the top 235 in all of college basketball. And for Seattle, with them seeing that diminishment with regards to their three-point shooting, I think that turns this into a sloppier slog of a game. I think that Seattle pulls it out, but I just don't think that they cover quite this big of a number. So set my line at 11. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Pepperdine. I made a total of a 135. So I'm in on the under, 749, 750 on the card. It's Portland. They're playing against Gonzaga. Gonzaga, a 21.5 point favorite, 152.5 is the total. And for Gonzaga, I set them as a 21.5 point favorite. I'm seeing a 21 out there. Personally, I would rather lay 21 with Gonzaga rather than take 22 with Portland, and this was 20.5 a little bit earlier, so I'm willing to lay with Gonzaga up to a 21. It's a Gonzaga group that is still playing up tempo, 44th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and in the defense, defense has really been the star for this Gonzaga team. They are now a top 8 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're still Mambo number 5 in terms of points per possession away from them, and now they've got Graham Ike back. He was missing for a few games, and he came back in that same Aries game, and boy, oh boy, did they need him, because he had 30 of the team's 73 points in that game. They're still dealing with the Braden Huff injury, but they should be able to absolutely slice and dice through a Portland team that's hovering right around about 265th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Gonzaga, they're looking to pound the ball down, though. They are 15th in the country in percentage of their field goal attempts that are 2-point shots, and Portland is 223rd in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And for Portland, it just is not going to go well for them down low, having to face off against a guy in Ty and Graham Foster, who's able to give you 11 points, 5 rebounds per game. Jalen Worley has been all over the place. 7.5 points, 5.5 boards, steal and a half, 2 assists per contest, just does a little bit of everything. And they're finally unlocking Davis Fogel, who shoots 44% from 3-point. And Gonzaga, they're still about a 34.5% 3-point shooting team, actually closer to 35.5% 3-point shooting team. And for Portland, with having Timo George currently being out, that's their number 2 scorer. That really hurts them, and we have noticed this with Portland. In terms of conference play, they have really diminished with regards to their interior defense. They rank 8th in the conference with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, 10th in opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, so they are really starting to give it up. And this Portland team is right around about 300th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They are currently outside the top 175 in terms of rebound percentage. Joe Foxwell is having to do a little bit of everything. 15 points, 4 boards, 6.5 assists, does shoot 35% for 3, and Mikhailo Balu has been able to shoot 35% for 3 for a Portland team that is going to be looking to push tempo themselves. In terms of total possessions per game, Portland, they're still hovering right in that neighborhood of about the top 75 in all of college basketball, more around about 96, but if you look at them in their home games, they're a top 55 team, so I do think that you're going to get an up and down game. I think that Gonzaga really going to be able to run it up here, so with Gonzaga, I'm willing to lay up to 21 with them, and set a total of 157.5, I'm in on the over. 751, 752, Loyola Marymount is going to be on the road against San Francisco, and the Dons of San Francisco are a 7.5 point favorite. 143.5 to 144.5 is the total. I made a total of a 138. I do like the under. You've got a Loyola Marymount team that is really starting to push some tempo in terms of total possessions per game. They do find themselves 133rd in all of college basketball, and San Francisco is starting to play a little bit faster, but this is still not a team that's necessarily going to be looking to absolutely just gun it up and down the floor. 258th in terms of total possessions per game. Now, Loyola Marymount is going to get clean possession. San Francisco outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but Loyola Marymount is not giving you much offense right now. They're 278th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Their forte is defense. It's a Loyola Marymount team that has been a top 50 unit in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage away from home. They're a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and it has been a San Francisco team that has really launched a lot from 3. They are taking over 44% of their shots from 3-point range, and they do shoot about 37.5% from 3-point range at home, but I think that Loyola Marymount is going to be able to hold up defensively. I did set them as a 6-point dog, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Loyola Marymount. The big key for them is that they were dealing with an injury to their point guard in Jan Vide for a little bit of time. He's come back. He's been able to give this team about 11.5 points, 4 assists. They'll shoot 35% from 3, and then MJ Amy, Hot Rod Brown, along with Jalen Shelley, they've been able to do a nice job as a trio of being able to combine for about 42 points per contest, with Brown shoots 39% from 3, and overall Loyola Marymount has been a solid 3-point shooting team. They shoot about 35% from 3-point range. You look at them nationally, and they're about 127th in the country, and it travels relatively well. They still shoot above 34% from 3-point range away from them. Now for Loyola Marymount, they've had a tough time taking care of the ball. They've been outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but I do think that with Loyola Marymount, something else that needs to be taken into account is that they're not giving themselves second and third chances. Really, both of these teams aren't necessarily grabbing a bunch of offensive rebounds. For the San Francisco team, they find themselves outside the top 135 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Loyola Marymount is outside the top 270, so you're not going to get those second and third chances for San Francisco. Country average team with their 2-point shooting percentage, and they're still dealing with the injury to Mookie Cook, who's giving you about 9.5 points and was shooting it relatively well from 3, but David Fuchs, along Tyrone Riley, combined for 12 rebounds and 24 points per game. And then Ryan Beasley, 13.5 points per game, but shoots 32.5% from 3. He's been hit or miss there. You've had Legend Smiley and Jujon Wong be able to combine for about 15.5 points, both shoot above 37% from 3, but also for San Francisco in a pressure spot, they shoot just 69.9% of the free throw line. That is outside the top 250 in all of college basketball. It's a Loyola Marymount team that follows a little bit but not a ton, and they themselves shoot 69% at the free throw line. So do you think that you get an under here? I did split my total at a 138, and at over 6 points, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Loyola Marymount. 753, 754. Clemson is on the road against Stanford, and Stanford is a home underdog here of 3.5 to 4 points. So I'll see him. It is 136 and 136.5, and I beat Clemson, the 4.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay 4 and not a half a point more with them. For Clemson, they've been able to do a relatively solid job of executing on both sides of the ball. They're a top 35 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They check in 69th, very nice in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And for some reason, Stanford, even though they're overall 142nd in the country in terms of points per possession, they're a top 100 team in terms of points per possession away from home. Meanwhile, they're about 225th in terms of points per possession at home. So that's an interesting dynamic. And for Clemson, it's just a whole is greater than some of its parts sort of effort right now. Is you've got 6 different guys between 7.1 and 12 points per contest, and then you've got 2 other guys in Jake Whalen along with Ephraim Johnson that both give you between 5.5 and 5.9 points per game. So all these guys work in tandem. They don't necessarily grab a lot of second and third chances. Clemson, in terms of offensive rebound percentage, they are well outside the top 225 in all of college basketball, but they've been a top 40 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Clemson does a nice job taking care of the ball. Top 45 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they do not allow good looks from 3. Teams are shooting less than 29.5% from 3 against them. That's a top 25 mark in the country. They're still a top 60 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, with Carter Welling, RJ Goffrey down low combined for about 22.5 points, about 11 rebounds per game. So I do like what these guys are able to bring to the table. And then on the flip side, you've got a Stanford group that has been able to have Abuka Okore just really take over the offense, 22 points. He only shoots 30% from 3, but he's able to give you about 3.5 assists per game. It's a Stanford team that they take a good amount of threes. They're a top 125 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range. They shoot about 34% as a collective. The big thing for the Stanford team is turnovers. They are a top 110 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and they will put you on the free throw line. They're a top 75 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. Stanford has been a top 60 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. This despite the fact that you've only got one guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, and AJ Rossi, who's been able to give you 7.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Oscar Galetti has been able to give you about 5 boards per contest. But I mean, these guys do a nice job in tandem of being able to hold in there. When Stanford gets to the free throw line, their country average shooting about 72% there, but they really do get blasted inside. They're outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they themselves are hovering right around about 300th with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Big issue going up against Clemson, team that is so good with their 3-point shooting defense. Do you think that this is going to be a slow down game, with Stanford being a relatively mid-tempo team to earn 5th in terms of total possessions per game, and Clemson, one of the slowest teams in the country at 314, so made a total of 134.5, 135 plus. I'm in on the under and will lay up to 4 with Clemson, 755, 756. San Diego is on the road against St. Mary's. St. Mary's, very sizable favorites here of 19.5 points, 146.5 to 147.5 is the total, and with St. Mary's, I did set them as a 21.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. You've got a San Diego team that all of a sudden is pushing a little bit more tempo in terms of total possessions per game. They're actually up to 90th in the country. Bit of a warp stat, though, because they played that overtime game against Oregon State where things just went all sorts of harebrained and crazy there. Prior to that, they were more around like 125th, 130th in terms of total possessions per game, and it is a San Diego team that is not going to give themselves second and third chances. They're well outside the top 230 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and they're just not executing on the inside. They're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, hovering around 200th with their own 2-point shooting percentage. Now, when they get to the free throw line, they shoot 77% of the free throw line, but they're a bottom 20 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. Tyler Johnson has been the head of the snake, 15.5 points, 4.5 assists, 2.5 steals. He only shoots about 31% from 3 now. Junari Lane, Juan Sebastian Goracito. These two guys both give you about 10.2 to 10.3 points per game. Between the two of them, they shoot about 39% from 3, and both shoot over 85% of the free throw line, so that's been nice for them, but St. Mary's should be able to just absolutely eat them alive down low, and it's still a St. Mary's team that, yeah, maybe they're a little bit faster than they have been in the past, but they're still outside the top 315 in terms of total possessions per game, 27th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and St. Mary's, when you put them on the free throw line, that's costly. They shoot 81.6% at the free throw line. That is numero uno in all of college basketball for St. Mary's overall. They're about 63rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but that does ascend into the top 45 when they're at home, as you've had Paulias Marsukis supplying 19 points, 7.5 boards, and then Joshua Dem, Mikey Lewis. They combine to shoot about 36.2% from 3 between the two of them. You're getting about 26 points per game. Andrew McKeever is able to give you 9.5 rebounds per game. San Diego is outside the top 300 with regards to rebound percentage. St. Mary's are a top 15 team with regards to rebound percentage. St. Mary's not going to put you under duress. They're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And San Diego, to their credit, they've been a top 45 team here, but I do think that was St. Mary's doing such a good job not allowing open looks. They're a top 45 team in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. I think that they lock it down on defense to be able to get it done. So my total at a 143.5, so I like the under and I'm willing to lay up to 21 here with St. Mary's, 757, 758. You've got Santa Clara on the road against Pacific, and let me be specific when I say that Pacific is currently a 6.5 to a 7.5 point home underdog. So this game is between 149.5 to 150.5, and with Pacific. I did set them as an underdog, 4.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points. This should be a relatively mid-tempo game. Santa Clara is starting to speed it up, 121st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Pacific is playing very slowly, though. 291st in terms of total possessions per game. Now, Pacific is shooting overall 35.6% from three. That actually goes down to 33.5% at home. And Santa Clara, they've been shooting about 35.5% from three-point range away from home. That is a top 85 mark in all of college basketball. The big thing for Pacific, they're going to need to take care of the ball. Santa Clara is a top 30 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and that is the ultimate kryptonite for Pacific. They are 346th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and if you look specifically at their home games, they are a bottom 10 team in terms of taking care of the ball, but this is also a Pacific team that is not going to allow for any sort of second and third chances, and that's been a little bit of a lifeblood here for Santa Clara this year with their dip in three-point shooting, as for Santa Clara, 8th in the country in terms of offensive rebound percentage, 36.9% of their missed shots become an offensive rebound, but for Pacific, right now, they are doing a great job in terms of not allowing second and third chances. When they are at home, teams grab just 17.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is number 3 in the country, and for Pacific, I absolutely love what Elias Rolfe has been able to bring to the table. A 6'7", versatile piece with about 16.5 points, 6.5 boards, shoots 41% from three. TJ Wainwright is about a 40% three-point shooter, and for Pacific, when they get to the free throw line, they sink them. They shoot 76.5% the charity stripe, top 45 mark in the country, and they've been good with their low post defense. They're a top 75 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. It's a Santa Clara team that they've been looking to pile drive the ball down low a little bit more this year with their dip in three-point shooting, as they've been a top 45 team with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage. For Santa Clara, they've done an okay job taking care of the ball, but they're about country average in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Elijah Mai, 14.5 points, 2.5 assists, steal and half per contest, shoots 35% from three. And Christian Hammond and Allen Graves both shoot 40+% from three. Graves, 7 boards, 10.5 points per game. Hammond, 17 points per game. And I do like what Jake Ammensinger has been able to bring to the table. 6.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3.5 assists. Steal per contest is a little bit of a versatile 6'7", 6'9"-ish sort of guy. But that said, I do think that Pacific, the way that they don't allow second and third chances, the way that they guard inside, is going to cause this game to be a bit lower scoring. And hold in there. I said my total at 148.5, so I like the under and the points here with Pacific. 759, 760 on the card. Washington State is going to be on the road against Oregon State. And Oregon State, a home underdog here of 1.5 to 2.5 points, 147.5 to 148.5 is the total. I did set a total of a 147.5, so 148 plus, I'm in on the under. I just don't know if you get enough possessions for the over, as Washington State, relatively country average team, 215th in terms of total possessions per game, and Oregon State, even with that overtime game against San Diego a few days ago, they're about 270th, and for both of these teams are just not taking good care of the ball. Washington State is 290th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Oregon State, 265th in the country, and Oregon State is not really a team that's going to put you under duress, and Oregon State is not giving themselves any sort of second and third chances whatsoever. Oregon State, in terms of offensive rebound percentage, they are outside the top 325 in all of college basketball. Right now, Josiah Lake, who supplies 13 points, 4.2 rebounds per game. He's your number 2 rebounder, with Jonah Much being able to give you about 4.6 rebounds per game. He leads the way with that regard, and for Oregon State, they do shoot quite a bit better when they're at home rather than away from home. From three-point range, away from home, they've been shooting less than 33% from three-point range. You get them in their home venue, and they're shooting closer to about 36% from three-point range, and it's a Washington State team that they become a top 50 team with their three-point shooting percentage at 36.5%. You've got an Oregon State squad that is about country average. A lot of opponents to shoot 32.5% from three-point range, but with Oregon State as well, they're not going to put you under duress. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Washington State, they're outside the top 300 as well, but break glass in case of emergency for Ace Glass. 16.5 points, 2.5 assists. He shoots 38% from three. And then you got a trio of guys, and Emil Yeho, along with Riyad Varvers and Andy Okafor, that all give you between 10.4 and 11.1 points per game. With Okafor and Yeho, they both give you 5.5 plus rebounds per game apiece. And Thomas Radson, who's dealt with a little bit of injury, when he's been out there, he's been able to give you about 9.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. He's going to be out of the full once again in this game, so they've had to replace him. But being able to step up, be able to give you a little bit more has been Emmanuel Ugbo with about 8 points. He throws in there about 3.5 rebounds per game in conference play. He's been able to make a nice little bit of an impact for this team, and I do think that with Washington State being a team that very much does not give you any sort of second and third chances. Top 25 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're about country average, shoot 73% the free throw line in a pressure spot. I do think that they do just enough to be able to get the job done here, and I do think that both of these teams just playing as slowly as they do just enough to be able to keep you under as well. Semi-total at 147.5, like the under, and with Washington State, I'm willing to lay up to 3 with them. 761, 762, it is Iowa. They're going to be on the road against Washington, and Washington is a home underdog of 1.5 to 2.5 points. 139.5 to 140.5 is the total, and I made a total of a 138.5, like the under. You had a Washington team that's going to look to push a little bit of tempo, not extreme, but they're about 169th in terms of total possessions per game, and much faster than this Iowa team. It was 359th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, with their games away from home being as slow as can be. 63.2% possessions per game. That is actually dead last in all of college basketball, and it's an Iowa team that has really been able to step up to the plate with regards to their defense, and they shoot it well from three-point range. Iowa right now is shooting 37.7% from three. That is 23rd in the country. That only falls to about 37.4% away from home, so it travels relatively well. They do take a little bit of a dive with regards to their defense away from home, but still, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, it's a unit that checks in 21st in the country. They give up about 12.5 points more per 100 possessions away from home, and you've got a Washington team that's outside the top 300 with regards to three-point shooting percentage, about 103rd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they've been dealing with so many different injuries, as Desmond Claude is going to be out for the foreseeable future. Wesley Yates has been a little bit in and out. I'm thinking that he should be a go in this one. 13.5 points, shoots about 37.5% from three. And Hans Steinbeck, he has been incredible. 17.5 points, 11.5 boards. He shoots 37% from three, but other than Frank Kepidog, nobody else on the roster gives you over 4.1 rebounds per game. And it's an Iowa team that just does a really good job as a collective of just gelling together. You don't have a single guy on the roster that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, but yet they're one of the better defensive rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. And they don't allow much easy inside, as they've been able to do a nice job in terms of generating turnovers. They're a top 35 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They are a team that is in the top 25 with their own 2-point shooting percentage, with Bennett Sturts giving 19 points, 5 assists to really lead the way. But Tavion Banks is outshot 52% for three, 11 points per contest. Alvaro Fogurius along with Cooper Koch, both of these guys shoot 39.1% for three, 8.5 points, 4 boards out of Fogurius, right around about 7 points per contest out of Koch. And I do think that these guys are going to be able to do just enough to be able to get the job done here, even against a Washington team that they've been able to do an okay job in terms of guarding the three-point line. For Washington, they're allowing opponents to only shoot from 3 points right around about 30% at home, so I do think that that causes for a little bit of a lower scoring game, but with the way that Iowa, I think, is going to be able to win the turnover battle in this situation of Washington being banged up in the backcourt, even with Zoom Diallo give you double figures, I think that they get the job done. I set my line at 4.5, wanted to lay with Iowa, and I like the under semi total 138.5. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 763, 764. New Mexico is going to be playing us to Utah State, and Utah State is a underdog here of 1.5 to 2.5 points. 156 after 158 is the total, and I made a total of a 147. I'm in on the under. You've got a New Mexico team that has been able to do a really good job in terms of generating turnovers, and for that matter, both of these teams are, because Utah State is currently number 1 in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis in a road/neutral venue. And for this Utah State team, they've been able to do a really good job in terms of traveling with their defense. 13th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home. Meanwhile, you've got a New Mexico team that's overall 70th in the country in terms of points per possession. So I do think that this Utah State team is going to do a great job there. And additionally, this is a Utah State team that has really owned the inside. 9th in the country with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. You've got a pair of teams that are relatively mid-tempo. New Mexico is looking to push a little bit more tempo, 127th in terms of total possessions per game. Utah State is actually closer to about 213th, but Utah State is going to have by far the top scorer in this game. That would be Mr. MJ Collins, who's been incredible with his 18.6 points per contest from three-point range. He's been able to shoot in the high 30s from three as well, actually closer to 40% from three. And then Carson Templin, Mason Fosloff. These two guys combined to shoot about 38% from three. Templin, 8.5 points, 4.5 boards, a block per contest, and then Fosloff, he's a do-it-all guy. 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2.3 steals, 16 points per game. Gary Clark has been able to do a nice job in terms of giving this team right around about 8 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Drake Allen, 5 assists of fewer than 2.2 turnovers per game. It's a Utah State team that's pretty solid in terms of taking care of the ball. Top 150 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they're also top 50 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. And then on the flip side for New Mexico, you've had Jake Hall really step up for the team. He's been their top scorer with 15.5 points, shoots 43.5% for three. And New Mexico is a solid 3-point shooting team. They shoot about 35.5% for three. They creeped into the top 125 with that, and they don't allow you to be able to get good looks from three. They're allowing teams to shoot 29% from three-point. That is a top 20 mark in the country, but they're about a country average team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. It's a New Mexico team that's good on the glass, but not amazing on the glass. Outside the top 75 with that regard, even with Tomislav Bujan being able to give you 12.5 12.5 points, 10 rebounds per game, as he's the only guy on the roster right now that gives you over 4.2 rebounds per game. JT Rock, who's got good size, only about 6 points, 3.5 boards, but does give you a block per game. I think that this is going to be a little bit more of a defense-oriented game, and with Utah State, I just have a lot of faith in them being able to pull this out away from home. They've been able to get the job done both on offense and defense away from home all season long, and I do think that their interior play allows them to be able to get the win. So Utah State is 1-point favorite. I like them on the money line, and I'm in on the under. I set my total at a 147, and now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-533, 306-534, you've got USC Upstate, and they're going to be on the road against UNC Asheville, and Asheville does find themselves as a pretty good size favorite here, as you're laying between 6.5 to 7 points. Total on this game, it is 140.5, and I'm going to be 1/8 points with Upstate. I did set them as a 5.5 point underdog. Now, neither of these teams are generating a bunch of turnovers. Upstate is 248th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, Asheville, they're more around about 264th, and for this Upstate team, they've left something to be desired on offense. They're outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and a team that's really not looking to push a ton of tempo this year for Upstate. It's not like they're super slow, but about 118th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Asheville has dialed it back from past years, 247th in terms of total possessions per game, but it is an Asheville team that they've been able to do a nice job in terms of owning things from three-point range. They're 98th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, with their own three-point shooting percentage that is 44th at 36.6%, but I do think that Upstate is going to be able to do a relatively sturdy job on the glass. They've been a top 225 team with regards to rebound percentages. Right now, you've got a quartet of guys with between 4.6 and 5.2 rebounds per game. Now, Braylon Garcia, one of those guys, has been dealing with a little bit of injury, but Carmelo Adkins, 13 points, 5 boards. He throws in there just under a steal per contest. Lyric Davis, Jeffrey Martinez combined for 10.2 rebounds and about 13.5 points per game. And it's an Upstate team that they themselves shoot about 34% from three, hovering right around country average, just haven't been able to execute inside. They're outside the top 250 with their own two-point shooting percentage, but they become a top 125 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. And for Asheville, you've got just a lot of weapons around the outside, including the 6'8" combo player, Etoya Solomon. He's been giving you about 16 points, throws in there nearly 7 rebounds, and now he's shooting 38% from three. Justin Wright has been Mr. Wright, top three-point shooter at 40%, 17.5 points per game, and then you've had Cameron Taylor be able to do a nice job headlining things as the top scorer with 18.5 points, 5.5 boards, about 3 assists per game. It is a Asheville team that has been outside the top tier with their two-point shooting percentage, and it's a unit that has become a top 175 team in terms of their rebound percentage as well. Not afraid to put you on the free throw line. They're a top 100 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis, but I do think that in the end, you do have this Asheville team be able to get the job done, but I just don't know if they can cover with shooting just 70% of the free throw line. That is outside the top 240 in all of college basketball. I do think that Upstate does a solid job inside. So my total 143.5. I like the over and the points with USC. Upstate made them 5.5 point dog. 36-535, 36-536. Winthrop is on the road against Radford. Radford is a underdog here of 3.5 points. 160.5 to 161 is a total. I said Winthrop is a 7.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. It's a Winthrop team that is a solid three-point shooting team at 34.1%. That's the top 175 mark in the country, and Radford has really been able to start to light it up from three at home. They're shooting about 36.3% from three-point range at home, but that's it for Radford. They give it up from the outside. At home, they allow opponents to shoot 39.8% from three. That is the bottom 30 mark in all of college basketball, and they're very much looking to take a bunch of threes, and Winthrop has been a top 150 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and Winthrop is going to be able to own the paint, as they've done a nice job being able to pull in their second and third chances. This is a top 65 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and Radford, they're just 279th in terms of percentage of their missed shots that become an offensive rebound. And for this Winthrop team, they're doing an exceptional job in terms of taking care of the ball as well. And this is a Radford team that's very willing to gamble. For turnovers for Winthrop, they are 25th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And if you look in at road/core venue, that actually goes to the top 15 in all of college basketball. While this is a Radford team that on defense are very willing to gamble for turnovers with a pair of ACC guards coming in there, and Dennis Parker, who's been able to give you 19 points, 6 boards, and he shoots about 38.5% for three. Began his career at NC State, throws in there a steal and a half per contest. Del Jones gives you a steal, 17 points, shoots 34% for three, and then Jalen Johnson, 2 steals per contest. So it's a Radford team that is a top 100 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but also outside the top 200 with regards to their opponents' two-point shooting percentage. And for Winthrop, the way that they were able to really turn things around and become more efficient on offense was bringing in the Duquesne transfers, Kareem Rozier, 3.5 assists, 13 points, shoots about 40% per three. Cody Cluett shoots 41% per three, 12.5 points per game, and then Logan Duncombe is right now owning the paint, 18.5 points, 8.5 rebounds. He really doesn't pop out and shoot it from three-point range or anything like that, but Winthrop also a top 30 team in terms of percentage of their possessions that end in a free throw, and they shoot about 73.5% when they're there. This is a Radford team that is one of the most foul all happy teams in all of college basketball as well, and I do think that as a result is going to give you high-scoring expose. Winthrop, 83rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Radford is absolutely gunning it this year in terms of total possessions per game, up to 17th, so semi-total 165.5. I like the over-end with Winthrop, 1 up to 7 with them. 306-537, 306-538. You've got Loyola Maryland, and they're going to be playing us a Lehigh, and Lehigh does find themselves as a very slim underdog here of 1.5 points. 148 to 148.5 is the total. Maybe by total 144. I'm in on the under. You've got two teams that are relatively mid-tempo. Loyola Maryland, 189th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Lehigh, 190th. So, they are right there, and this is a Lehigh team that's not really going to put you under duress. 263rd in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Loyola Maryland, they've honestly been an okay team in terms of generating turnovers. They're in the top 200 with this regard, and the big thing for Lehigh, and the big reason why I'm going to be willing to lay with Loyola Maryland is this. I did set Loyola Maryland as a 2-point favorite, is that Lehigh is just getting blasted on the glass right now, and I recognize that Loyola Maryland isn't the Mona Lisa Vitos of hitting the glass, 261st in the country with regards to rebound percentage. Lehigh is 354th in the country, and that's despite the fact that you've got 6'9" Hank Alvey, who, by the way, has actually been able to shoot it quite well from 3-point range. He's right now supplying you with about 13 points, 7 boards. He shoots in the high 40s from 3-point range on very low volume, but even with that, this team is just getting absolutely run off the glass. You do have Joshua Ingram, who's been able to do a nice job, give you about 10.5 points. He throws in their 5 boards per game, and Nasir Woodlock is going to be the best scorer in this game. 20 points per game, shoots 40% for 3. For a Lehigh team that they do shoot about 34.8% for 3, that's a top 175 mark in the country, and they actually just dare you to pile drive the ball down low. They're a top 20 team in terms of percentage of opponent shots that come from 2-point range, and for Lehigh, they've been able to do an okay job in terms of executing on offense down low. Top 155 team with regards to 2-point shooting percentage, but they're also outside the top 240 with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis. Loyola Maryland, they're more around about 225th with that regard. And Loyola Maryland, country average team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. At home, that does go into the top 150 though, and you have Braden Speed, who's been able to give you 15 points. He shoots 36% for 3. Jordan Steinke is able to give you 8.5 points, shoots in the mid-30s from the outside. Jacob Theodusu is a do-it-all guy with about 15 points, pair of steals. Now, has been dealing with quite a bit of injury recently. I'm thinking that he's going to be out of the fold once again in this game, but he looks like he might be getting a little bit closer to returning. And Amit Adir has also been another guy that's been dealing with injury, but came back in that game against Navy at 28 points, so looks like he's all going to go, and that's big for a Loyola Maryland team that's been missing quite a few guys thus far this season. For Loyola Maryland in the pressure spot, they only do shoot about 69% at the free throw line, but with this being a top 125 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, with Lehigh just not doing a great job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, and it's a Lehigh team that loves to shoot it from 3, but they go up against a Loyola Maryland team that's in the top 225 with both their own 3-point shooting percentage and opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. I think that that's enough to be able to get the job done here. So by total 144, I like the under, and Loyola Maryland laying the 1.5. 306-539, 306-540. Navy is on the road. They're facing off against Lafayette. Lafayette is a underdog here of between 4.5 to 4 points, and your total on this game is 135.5. I did set my total at 134.5, so I like the under. As you've got a pair of teams that are really not going to be looking to push tempo whatsoever. For Lafayette, they're a little bit faster than Navy. They're about 273rd in terms of total possessions per game. Navy's 326th, but this is a Navy team that's doing a really good job on the glass. They're a top 50 team in terms of rebound percentage. Lafayette is well outside the top 250 with that regard, and Navy's one of the best mid-major defenses in the country, 35th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis in a road/neutral venue that actually ascends into the top 25 with Aiden Kaoe doing a really good job down low. He's supplying the team with over 8.5 rebounds. He's been able to give you about 15 points per game. Actually has ascended to over 10 rebounds per game, and Asim Mangini is now giving you 49% three-point shooting, 18.5 points per game. It's a Navy team that has been outside the top 225 with regards to ball security, but they're not allowing opponents to get second and third chances, and they're not allowing good looks from three-point range. It's a Navy team that ranks in the top 40 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and that's an issue for a Lafayette team that they just frankly don't have a lot down low. For this Lafayette team, currently they rank outside the top 320 with regards to their own two-point shooting percentage. Caleb Williams, Andrew Phillips, they've been your main two headline scorers, combining for about 31.3 points per game. Williams shoots 38.5% from 3 and does not play for the Bears. And you've got Phillips shooting 35% from 3, but able to get a little bit of outside shooting as well out of Christian Humphrey Rembert, who's been able to shoot 36% from 3, 8.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. One guy on the roster, though, that gives you over 5.2 rebounds per game, with Don Draper giving you about 7 points, 6 rebounds per game, and over a steal per contest. And in this Lafayette team, they take great care of the ball. They're a top 125 team in terms of ball security, but it just doesn't result in great offense whatsoever. They're not hitting the glass, and it's a team that's outside the top 300 with regards to opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Do think that Navy goes out there, gets the job done, and keeps this low scoring at a 135 or higher. I'm in on the under end with Navy. I'm willing to lay up to 6 with them. 306-541, 306-542. Charleston Southern, they're on the road against High Point, and High Point, nope, did not be a low point as a 13.5 point favorite. 163 to 163.5 is the total line. Set a total of 164.5. I like the over. You've got a High Point team that has been slowed down a little bit more recently, but they're still 97th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Charleston Southern is gunning it. 12th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Charleston Southern is not going to generate any turnovers whatsoever. They're outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. High Point is actually a top 20 team, but High Point is also numero uno in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, so they do a great job taking care of the ball, but it's not like this Charleston Southern defense was relying upon generating turnovers to start with. What Charleston Southern does is make sure that you don't get good, clean looks as they become a top 45 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, top 100 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and you got Bryson, Blaine, Allen, Sumler that combine for 36 points per game, and Sumler shoots 40% from 3. You've got Luke Williams, who's been able to shoot about 38% from 3 with 10 points per contest. Jesse Hafenmeister, 11.5 points, 5 rebounds. Good versatility from all of these guys. And for the Charleston Southern team, they've been a top 135 team in terms of both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, for High Point, they deal with an injury to their top scorer in Cameron Fletcher, who's been able to give you about 15.5 points, throws in there about 7.5 rebounds per game. We did see him return in that game against Presbyterian, but only played 9 minutes. So he might be able to go in this one, but I don't think that he's going to be 100%. Additionally, you've got Rob Martin and Scary Terry Anderson combined for 29.5 points per game between the two of them. They shoot about 34 to 35% from 3. You've been able to have Scotty Washington step up with about 8 points at a steal per contest, and for this High Point team, they just really execute on the inside. They're a top 20 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, and they're solid from 3-point. They shoot 36.5% from 3. They've been a top 70 team with that regard, but they're also great in terms of getting to the free throw line. They're a top 15 team in terms of free throws attempted on a per possession basis. That means a lot of points with the clock stopped, and this is a Charleston Southern team that is a bottom 15 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis, and for Charleston Southern, it is an issue that they only shoot 64% at the free throw line, but with the way that they don't allow clean looks, with the way that they themselves have been able to shoot it from both 2-point and 3-point range, and with Reese Jones give you a pair of blocks per game, I do think that Charleston Southern does enough to be able to hold in this game. Set my line at 10.5, so I'm going to be in on the points with Charleston Southern, and with this total at 163.5, I'm in on the over sub by total 164.5. 306-543, 306-544. American is going to be playing us to Bucknell in the bracket. Bus and Bison are a 7.5 to an 8.5 point underdog. Total on this game 138.5 to 139.5. I did set my line at 9.5. I'm willing to lay it with American. For Bucknell, they just have not been able to do a good job whatsoever in terms of their ball security. This Bucknell team, 315th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and they go up against an American team that they don't necessarily do the world's greatest job with regards to their overall 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage defenses, but the one thing that they do a pretty solid job of on defense is being able to generate turnovers. As American is 64th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and if you look specifically at their home games, that actually ascends into the top 30, and Bucknell has just been a sloppy team all season long. Not a team that's going to be looking to push any tempo whatsoever, as should get a slow and controlled game. American 272nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Bucknell is 253rd, but for Bucknell, they're just getting absolutely barbecued down low. Right now, they're outside the top 275 with regards to rebound percentage. You've got Amondoris, who comes over from Germany, gives you 14.5 points, but at 6'10", he only gives you about 3.8 rebounds per game. You've got 3 guys on the roster that give you over 4 rebounds per game. Rajat Boryarki, who's right now dealing with an injury. You've had Gugar Bisic, who's been able to give you about 5 boards, 5 points per contest, but he's been out since January as well, so that's 2 of your top 3 rebounders right there, and that leaves you with Archulay Spendone, who gives you 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds. Should be good to go in this game, but Bucknell also shooting 31.9% from 3. That's outside the top 275 in all of college basketball. They're outside the top 300 with both their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. Just a big giant mess, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9 with American, an American team that they've had a few struggles with regards to their top guys shooting it from 3. That's Greg Jones and Maiden Collins. They both combine for about 25.5 points per game. Neither guy shoots above 30% for 3, but the ancillary guys like a Wyatt Nadesis, he's able to shoot 40% for 3 with 9 points per game. Jalen Itaribe has been able to give you 5 boards, 10 points. He shoots 34% for 3. Jeff Spruce shoots 38% from the outside. It's an American team as a top 75 team with their free throw shooting percentage at 76%. They're a top 125 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. They themselves are outside the top 225 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but I do think that they should be able to go out there, control this game, get the job done, and I do think that with Bucknell being very, very very inefficient on defense. You get the over. I saw my total 141.5, so I do like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 9 with American. 3-6-5-45, 3-6-5-46. You've got Longwood on the road against Gardner-Webb. Gardner-Webb, home underdogs of 11.5 to 12.5 points. 146 after 147 is the total, and I did make a total of a 154. I like the over. For Gardner-Webb, it's just all sorts of awful for them right now. They're in the bottom 10 in all of college basketball in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis and rebound percentage, and they're playing fast at 102nd in terms of total possessions per game. Longwood, more of a mid-tempo team, 150th in terms of total possessions per game. What has been really the kryptonite for this Longwood team has been turnovers. They're outside the top 330 in terms of their ball security, but now you get to go up against Gardner-Webb team that's outside the top 260 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Longwood outside the top 300 with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. That's been a little bit of an issue, as right now for the season they're only shooting about 30% from the outside, but they should be able to pile drive the ball down low against a Gardner-Webb team that they just really don't have much with regards to low post play either. You've got 2 double-figure scores for this Gardner-Webb team that have been able to do an okay job, and Jacob Hallgrath, Spence Stims, they combined to be able to give you about 21.2 points per contest, and both shoot over 40% from 3 points, albeit for Hallgrath, very, very low volume. Jacob Hudson, he's been able to give you about 9 points, 4 rebounds per game, but has been dealing with a little bit of injury. Should be good to go here, but since coming off of injury, he just has not been himself, to say the least, and it's a Gardner-Webb team that on offense, they themselves are outside the top 300 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, 3-point shooting percentage, and free throw shooting percentage, but for Longwood, they should be able to turn defense and offense as well. They've been a top 50 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. You've got Elijah Tucker, who's been able to supply 12.5 points, doesn't really give you any sort of 3-point shooting, and Red Thompson is like the lone guy that gives you over 32% 3-point shooting, shoots 37% from 3, 10.5 points per game, but it's a Longwood team that sort of knows what they are. They're going to look to pile drive the ball down low, top 55 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 2-point range, and they themselves are about 300th with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, so I think they get a nice high-scoring expose, but I think that Longwood turns the defense into offense. They're going to be able to get a lot more clean possessions than normal as well, and get the job done against the Gardner-Webb team that already allowed over 90 points to a non-D1 team in North Greenville on their home floor, so semi-line at a 154 with the total. I'm going to be in on the overhand with Longwood. Will lay up to 13.5 with them. 3-6-5-47, 3-6-5-48. Army is going to be on the road against Colgate. Colgate a 10 to a 10.5 point favorite. 149 to 149.5 is the total. And with Army, I set them as a 15-point dog. I'm going to be willing to lay it for Army. This team is a top 10 team in the country in terms of percentage of their shots that come from 3-point range, and away from home, they shoot 31.6% from 3-point range. That's not necessarily great, to say the least. Now, Army has been a top 175 team in terms of rebound percentage, and Colgate is not giving themselves any sort of second and third chances whatsoever, but they do run into a Colgate team that has been relatively solid with regards to their interior defense, and for Colgate right now, they are allowing teams to shoot about 34.5% from 3, so they've been outside the top 225 with that regard. It actually goes up to 37.5% at home, but I do think that those home and road splits got ironed out, and it's a Colgate team that they themselves love to bomb it from 3, and right now Army is 308th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, so even though I don't think that you necessarily get an up-tempo game, you've got Army about 186th in terms of total possessions per game. Colgate is 235th. I do think that you're going to be able to get some efficiency here. I don't know if it's going to be quite enough for the over. I did set my total at a 147, so I'm going to be in on that under, but for Army right now, you've got Tate Lozowski down low, who's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds, 5 points per game, and then I like what Ryan Curry brings to the table. 15.5 points, 4.5 boards, 5 assists. He's been able to shoot 38.5% from 3, and Jackson Squared and Jackson Furman along Jackson Bell, they've been nice ancillary scorers, combined about 21.5 points per game, and between the two of them, they do shoot 37% from 3, but I do think that Colgate home and road split is going to iron out a little bit, and they've got the most versatile player out there on the floor, Jalen Cox. He's been able to give you 5 boards, 5.5 assists, 17.5 points per game on 42% 3-point shooting. It's a Colgate team that has been able to do a very good job in terms of executing both on the inside and the outside. Top 100 team with regards to their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages. Now, they failed to be able to get to the free throw line, but in a pressure spot, they do shoot about 73% at the free throw line. Ben Tweedy's been able to get 8.5 points, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Kyle Carlismo has been able to shoot 37% for 3. Great weapons here for Colgate, and this Colgate team has done a nice job in terms of taking care of the ball. Top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and this is an Army team that's prone to get a little bit sloppy with it. They've been outside the top 175 in terms of ball security, and they don't put you under duress. They're about 300th in the country in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. So do you think the Colgate goes out there, gets the job done in this ordeal? I'm willing to lay up to 14.5 with them, and with Army just not shooting it the same from 3-point range away from home, I'm in on the under sub. I total at a 147, 36-5-49, 36-5-50. Arkansas Pine Bluff is on the road against Grambling. Grambling is a 6.5 to a 5.5 point favorite. 145 to 145.5 is the total line. I did set a total here of a 149.5. I'm in on the over. You've got a Grambling team as more of a mid-tempo team in terms of total possessions per game, 199th in the country. Pine Bluff is just absolutely looking to gun it. They are 28th 28th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And it's a Pine Bluff team that has been shooting 43.2% from three-point range at home, 30.6% away from home, but in conference play, because much of the road split is because they were playing a bunch of bye games and everything like that. They have been able to shoot it a little bit better there, and I do think that Pine Bluff has the best two players on the floor, which is why I'm willing to take the points, set my line at 5.5. As for Pine Bluff, you've got Keon Williams giving you 17 points, 8 boards, 6 assists, shoots about 37% for three. Jaquan Scott, 35.5% three-point shooter with about 15.5 points per game himself. And then with this Pine Bluff team, they've been a solid team in terms of getting to the free throw line, and they surrender a lot of free throw attempts. They're a bottom 20 team in terms of keeping you off the free throw line, and they've been outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but in conference play, they do shoot 38.5% from three, and a Pine Bluff team that overall for the season turns the ball over about 14.2 times per game. That's down to about 12.5 times in conference play, and for the scrambling team, the name of the game for them has been turnovers. Top 30 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense. On offense, they're a bottom 20 team in terms of taking care of the ball with 15 turnovers per game, but they've been able to do a relatively solid job down low. They're a top 240 team with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage and their own two-point shooting percentage, with Darius Ward, Antonio Munoz combining for 23.5 points per game. And then you've had Roderick Coffey shoot 49% from three, 9 points, 4.5 boards, 4 assists per game. But I do think that Pine Bluff is doing a little bit better job in terms of taking care of the ball with the way that they shoot it from three. I do think that they're going to be able to remain lively and scrambling, good at getting to the free throw line. Top 75 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. So like the over sub, I total 149.5, and we'll take 6+ here with Pine Bluff. 3 of 6, 551, 3 of 6, 552. North Alabama's on the road against Central Arkansas. Central Arkansas, sizable favorites here of 10.5 points, 146.5 is the total, and I said my total 148.5. I do like the over. Central Arkansas is really buffed up with their defense. They become a top 225 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for North Alabama, they are a slow team. They're 293rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but for North Alabama, despite the fact that they're playing as slowly as they are, they just really have not been good on defense. They're allowing teams to shoot 35.5% from three-point range. That's a bottom 125 mark in all of college basketball. And you just take a look at the raw points allowed on a per possession basis, 334th. Central Arkansas, meanwhile, they've been allowing teams to shoot less than 31% from three-point range. They still can be at inside. They're outside the top three with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, but Central Arkansas at home shooting 38.3% from three-point range. I know that Rob Donaldson mentioned him, but Cameron Hunter has been able to do a really good job with his squad. He's been able to give you 16 points, throws in there 3 assists, a few rebounds per game, and for Central Arkansas, they're going to have to match up with a pair of guards and Dante Bacchus along Kanan Jefferson, who have been able to combine for about 27.5 points per game, but neither shoots above 30% from three-point. You've got Cornelius Williams, who gives you 13 points, 9.5 rebounds per game. He's going to be the best rebounder in this game, but for this North Alabama team, they're also outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. For North Alabama, they've also been outside the top 250 with regards to their own points scored on a per possession basis. We've really seen this offense take some strides backwards, and that's a big reason why I'm willing to lay with Central Arkansas. Made them a 12.5 point favorite. As for Central Arkansas, they're actually a top 80 team with regards to their two-point shooting percentage, with Ty Robinson give you 14.5 points, 5 boards per contest. I mean, Robinson is like the lone guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, but right now you've got 5 different guys that give you at least 3.7 rebounds per game, so they do a nice job as a collective. And Central Arkansas at home has been a top 75 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're not allowing a lot of second and third chances. They can be out on the inside. I think that those interior buckets are just enough for you to be able to get the over, but love the way that this Central Arkansas team is operating, with having also a guy in Javion Kai King, great name, give you 9 points, a steal, 4.5 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from 3, and I think the Central Arkansas goes out there, gets the job done as a team that ranks right around about 100th in terms of total possessions per game. So, on the over sub, I total 148.5, and we'll lay up to 12 here with Central Arkansas. 3 of 6, 553, 3 of 6, 554. Lipscomb is on the road against Austin Peay, and Austin Peay is a favorite of 3.5 points. For this game, it is between 153 to 154.5, and I said Austin Peay is a 5.5 point favorite. Going to be willing to lay the number. You've got a Lipscomb team that's very much looking to play up tempo. They're 81st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Austin Peay not shy to run as well at about 119th in terms of total possessions per game, and it's an Austin Peay team that has been a country average team, shooting 33.5% from 3. That goes up to 34.1% at home. Meanwhile, Lipscomb, they've been really good from 3 at 36.5%. That is 47th in the country, but that 36.5% goes down to about 34.5% away from home. And Lipscomb has had their issues in terms of generating turnovers away from home. Away from home, they're well outside the top 100 with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis. One of the better teams in the country at home, and Lipscomb overall 187th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Austin Peay is 77th in the country, and this is an Austin Peay team that's very capable in terms of generating turnovers. They've been been a top 40 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and this is a Lipscomb team that sometimes they just get a little bit loose with it. They're 115th in the country with this regard, but if you take a look at them in a road or neutral court venue, that falls outside the top 200, and for Lipscomb, they're going to be relying upon their overall versatility, as you've got someone in Grant Asman who stands right around about 6'9". He's been given the team 14 points, 6.5 boards, and has shot it quite well from three-point range at 37.5%. Charlie Williams, he shoots about 33% for three. He's about 6'10". Supplies 11 points per game. And Mateo Esmeraldo, 7 assists, a fewer than 2 turnovers per game, 10.5 points per game. You've got for the Austin P team, actually, 6 different guys that give you at least 7 points per contest, but it's a relatively thin rotation. And then for Austin P, name of the game for this team has been turnovers, but you've got a guy down low that's able to do a nice job. And Rashad Marshall comes over from Arkansas State. He's been giving you about 13.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Colin Parker, along with Zaire Collins, are your top scorers. They've been able to combine for about 29.5 points per game, and Parker shoots 42.5% from three. And Tom Berkshire has been a nice ancillary guard, being able to give you about a trio of assists per game. And for Austin P, they're a relatively good team in terms of taking care of the ball, top 140 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're a country average team with their own 2-point shooting percentage and opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but for this Austin P team, way that they generate turnovers, I think that that's going to be just enough to be able to find a way to get the job done in a little bit of a lower scoring game. So by total 147.5, I like the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 5 with Austin P. 306.555, 306.556. You got Maryland Eastern Shore on the road against South Carolina State. South Carolina State underdogs of 3 to 3.5 points. 136 to 136.5 is the total. Set a total of a 132. I'm in on the under now. South Carolina State is looking to push a bit more tempo. 112th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Maryland Eastern Shore is not looking to push tempo. Maryland Eastern Shore right now in terms of total possessions per game is 338th, and there's no reason to think that they're going to be speeding up, as this team is right now a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but it's not like you've got a bunch in South Carolina State that's necessarily firing all cylinders with regards to their offense as well. Now, I will say for the South Carolina State team, the one thing that they do is shoot it well from three. At home, they shoot 37.3% from three-point. That's actually a top 125 mark in all of college basketball, but this is also a Maryland Eastern Shore team that they've been able to do an okay job in terms of generating turnovers. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense, they've been a top 150 team there. Overall, they're about 225th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and South Carolina State is about 356th in the country, so that's a little bit of an issue, but that's it for Maryland Eastern Shore. Right now, you've only got 2 double-figure scorers. Zion Oblana, 10 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Joseph Lucardo has been able to give you about 10.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game, and for this Maryland Eastern Shore team, Tuesdays are shooting just 32.2% from three against them, so that's big in containing a South Carolina State team that they're very much looking to pound it from the outside because their interior play not necessarily so great. And Michael Teal has actually been able to give you 3.5 assists per game for Maryland Eastern Shore, albeit a Maryland Eastern Shore team that's a bottom 5 team in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Meanwhile, you got a South Carolina State team that they've been a country average team in terms of generating turnovers, but they're a bottom 20 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, bottom 5 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage. At a pressure spot, South Carolina State 63.6% at the free throw line. That is the bottom 5 mark in the country. Now you do have Jaden Johnson, Owen Bronson, who have been able to combine for about 24.5 points per game, and they, between the two of them, shoot about 36.5% from three, and then Noah Treadwell's shot 35% from three, 8.5 points per game, but I had all sorts of sloppiness here. They're also a bottom 40 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. I think that you get just a very, very turnover-heavy game in this one, and I just can't trust in South Carolina State to be able to get the outright win, but I could only set Maryland Eastern Shore as a 2-point favorite as well because I can't trust their offense to be very clean, and they only shoot 71% of the free throw line. So in this slog, I'm willing to take the points with South Carolina State, set them as a 2-point dog, and I'm willing to also take a shot on the underside by total at a 132 and wrap things up with 306.557, 306.558. Northwestern State, they play East Texas A&M. East Texas A&M is between a 3 to a 3.5 point underdog. 143 to 143.5 is the total. Set by total 141.5. I'm in on the under. You got an East Texas A&M team that's looking to push a little bit of tempo, 140th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Northwestern State is not looking to push tempo. They're 302nd in terms of total possessions per game, and both teams have their warts. East Texas A&M 260th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Northwestern State, they are 321st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and the big key for Northwestern State is that they have been absolutely terrible on the glass. They're outside the top 330 in terms of their overall rebound percentage, but Willie Williams should be the best overall rebounder in this game. 9 points, 8.3 rebounds per game. Lone guy on the roster that gives you over 3.5 rebounds per game, but Mike Thomas, 17 points, shoots 93% the free throw line, 36.5% for three. Izzy Miles shoots 45% for three, 10.5 points per game. Now Northwestern State outside the top 225 in terms of ball security, and the one thing that East Texas A&M has been able to do a relatively solid job of is being able to generate turnovers. As for the East Texas A&M team, they themselves are well outside the top 250 in terms of their rebound percentage as well, but they do rank in the top 100 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and you do have to like what the Tarleton State transfer and Rodney Harrison has been able to bring to the table. As he's right now their top guy with about 15.5 points, 6 boards per contest. Maybe deal with a little bit of an injury to one of their top 3-point shooters, and Vinny Sagana, who's been able to overall for the season give you about 8.5 points from 3-point range, shoots about 40% for 3, did return in the previous game, so he should be all good to go here, but it's an East Texas A&M team that just really doesn't execute on the inside themselves, and when they get to the free throw line, they're 318th in the country at 68.2% of the free throw line, outside the top 200 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. Now, in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, top 200 team there, but that said, they're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, with Izzy Miles coming over from Tarleton State himself for Northwestern State. He's been able to give the team 10.5 points, shoots 43% from 3-point range, and Northwestern State shooting about 74.5% of the free throw line. That's a top 120 mark in the country. I do think that this bunch in Northwestern State does just enough to be able to get the job done, and with their slow and controlled play outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions frame, that keeps it under. Semi-total at a 141.5, like the under, and with Northwestern State willing to lay up to 3 with them, and that wraps things up for the Wednesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Best. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GUDET_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So, per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and other ways find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast with picks and analysis on every game, every day. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.